Welcome to the Edina City Council meeting. It is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, and we've got a few things that we need to cover before we call the meeting to order. And I know folks could be tuning in by cable TV under watching our computers or Facebook.com. There's a couple opportunities tonight because we're doing meetings now in a hybrid format. Where people can either appear in the council chambers like all of you are doing this evening, or they could be calling in on our line, on our number, and they can call in for either community comment. And community comment covers those things that aren't on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing. So if you want to address a council on a matter of concern to you during community comment that's not on the agenda tonight or scheduled for a future public hearing, feel free to come forward when we get to that portion of the agenda. If you're wanting to talk to us either during the community comment portion of the agenda or during one of the two public hearings that we have, and you're in the virtual world with us this evening, you can call 800-374-0221, 800-374-0221. The conference ID tonight is 507-9642. It's on the screen right now, 507-9642. If you call in, get in the queue, tell the operator your name and address, and after you've done that, just be patient and we'll have you get into the main council meeting by pressing *1, and Director Benarott will bring you in to speak to the council. A reminder again, I know Director Benarott shared a great deal of information with you. You'll have 3 minutes this evening to make your remarks. You'll get a yellow warning light when you got 30 seconds to go, so you should think about wrapping up your comments right at the red light at the 3-minute mark. So having provided that information, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first order of business this evening is roll call. Clerk Allison, roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Staunton.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, folks. And we have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Do we have any modifications to that, Manager Neal?
No modifications from staff.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as shown?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to approve the meeting agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as published and as shown, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now, folks, we're going to next go to community comment. And remember, if you're out in the virtual world, as I mentioned earlier, 800-374-0221 is the number. Conference ID 507-9642. And there may be some folks in the audience that want to address us as well. This past weekend and over the past few weeks, we've had some episodes of criminality in the city. And we wanted to deal with that right off the bat this evening with respect to our city manager and our chief of police who's here to address this issue. That might help some of you that are here to express some concern about this matter and what I would think would be the seepage of crime into not only Edina, but also into some of the other suburbs. I've been talking to other mayors in Minnetonka and Eden Prairie, and it seems like the trouble is getting out into the suburban communities as well here as our core cities. So I'm going to turn it now over to Manager Neal, and he's going to make a presentation. We're going to show you a video, and then our Chief of Police is going to bring you up to date on some things that all of us can be doing to keep ourselves safer, and also the things that our police department will be doing to help keep all of us safe. Director Benarott, thank you. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have two things that we want to share with the council tonight, and really they reflect a two-pronged strategy to address the particular issues that we encountered over the weekend. One is about what ordinary residents can do, and the other is about what our police department is going to do and how we work together to combat this issue. So the first thing that we want to share with you is a video clip from Beyond the Badge, a local cable show that we work on here that talks about the activities of our police department and public safety in general. This is something we've been working on around this particular topic, and we wanted to share that with council tonight. Following that, Chief Milburn's got some comments that he would like to make as well. So, Ms. Benaron, if you could start this, please. It's about 6 minutes.
Earlier this year, I started working our auto thefts. We've seen a rise in them over the last year or two. And in July, we applied and got approved and started a grant. So I'm officially what's called our auto theft investigator. So any case in our city, whether it be a burglary or a theft or anything of that nature that originates or stems in auto theft, I get assigned that case. The ultimate goal is to form a larger network of detectives or investigators from all over the state, so we can hone in on groups that are affecting us or hitting us pretty hard, and hopefully deter that from happening in our community. A while ago, we used to see cars you could start with a screwdriver, and with newer cars, that's not the case anymore. So the biggest thing that we're seeing now is people are leaving their keys either in unlocked vehicles, they'll leave their garage door open, or they'll leave their keys in a readily accessible spot. So the reason we're seeing an increase of auto thefts is typically when people go to commit a crime now, they think, why would I do this in my own car when I can go steal a car that has no relation or trace back to me? So 50% of the time, actually, stolen cars are being used to commit other crimes. So one case in particular, we had a vehicle that was stolen by a group of juveniles earlier this year. Later that evening, after the car was stolen, they committed a first-degree burglary in Edina. Later on that night, they went to St. Louis Park, committed theft from autos, so they stole from cars that were parked out on the road or in parking lots. And then they continued to escalate their behavior and went into Minneapolis and started committing armed robberies of people. So in this case, they found people that were walking alone in Minneapolis, and they took them against their will and held a gun to them and forced them to unlock their cell phone, disable their iCloud so they could reset it, and then kick the people out. They're all armed with handguns, even though they were juveniles. In every single case that we've had so far since July 1st, the car's been taken with keys. The vast majority of them have been left unlocked in driveways or out on the street with the keys and the cup holder, or at times people will leave the valet key inside the car. And with the evolution of technology with push to start, people may not remember that they have to put the key in the ignition to start it, and if it's anywhere in the vehicle, all someone has to do is step on the brake and push the start button. There were cases where there were unlocked cars in the driveway, and they opened the overhead garage door and went inside the house and grabbed keys from the kitchen, front entryway. But the most popular way has been people leaving their vehicles unlocked with the keys inside of them. The number one tip I have is we need to remember to lock our cars, and we need to take our keys with us. If you purchase a new car, a lot of them have valet keys that may be left in a cup holder or inside the glove box or center console. And we need to make sure that when we have new cars, we're taking a once over and looking at that. And it's as easy as, if you don't think your keys are with you, get in your car, and if you can start your car, there's a key in there somewhere. So we need to make sure to lock our cars, take our keys with us, and then it may be a pain to do, but if we park in our driveway, you may have to take your garage door openers with you, just because people are looking for that opportunity to get more. And if they can get inside your car and pop the garage door in the middle of the night, they're probably going to do that. It's preventable, and I think if everyone does this, if you notice someone in your family that isn't doing it, remind them about it. So continue to educate people when you can, and help make my job easier too.
And now, Your Honor, I'd like to ask Chief Milburn if he would say a few words to the council, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, Chief Todd Milburn here with the Edina Police Department. So I'd like to speak a little bit to what happened here over this last weekend. And first, I'd like to just offer up some background and some perspective of what we saw here. We did have I'd say a spike or an increase in crime here on a number of different fronts, in particular some property crimes. But the emerging pattern and a concern of issue for us were two neighborhoods in particular, the Country Club neighborhood and Indian Hills neighborhood. In the background there, what happened this weekend is in those neighborhoods we had 3 different auto thefts occur. In all those cases, we had situations where suspects were arriving in already stolen cars, and they were dropping off occupants in these neighborhoods to check different home addresses and vehicles, targets, if you will, to see if any cars were available to them to steal. And so alert residents, alert neighbors saw this activity and called our officers. And so as this was occurring, our officers arrived in the area and located 2 stolen cars as they were fleeing. These occurred in both neighborhoods, different times. And in those cases, those transferred over into pursuits. And as our officers were pursuing the suspects in these cases, the circumstances became too dangerous, and so they terminated the pursuit, which is a common practice here. If the risk behavior gets a little bit too high, we have a public safety concern to be worried about. And so those incidents occurred, and those cases are still being actively investigated through our investigative division. I am always quick to point out that even though we terminate a pursuit, we still follow up on that aggressively and review the case and try and find the suspects involved, and so that work is in progress. A little bit more about what we've done since this weekend. As indicated in the video, these are crimes of opportunity, and we can all help each other out and do some work here to try and prevent these things from happening. We sent out a press release earlier today to notify our community members of what had happened. We offered some crime prevention tips, and we offered some information to our residents about what we're doing in the police department. We also informed our community members that we redirected and reallocated our patrol officers into the impacted neighborhoods here, going back to earlier this week, and that work will continue over the next couple of weeks. We also reallocated our traffic unit officers who normally provide traffic enforcement. Those officers have been pulled from that duty and are also in these neighborhoods that have been impacted and doing extra patrol and providing an extra presence there. We have very talented investigators that are passionate about this work, and they're currently working very hard on these cases. Public safety is our primary concern, and our staff will continue to work hard on protecting our residents and the guests in our community. A couple added notes here I want to provide. We also, as indicated in the video here, we applied for a state-funded grant for an auto theft investigator. We were awarded that grant earlier this year. And the reason why we were selected is because this community and this police department is well respected and known for our aggressive enforcement activities on this type of property crime and auto thefts. And so we were awarded some funds to pay for that position. But what that gets us is what we call a force multiplier. And so we have a full-time investigator that looks at these cases and does aggressive follow-up, but it also connects us into a regional task force across the metro area, and that's up and running. And so that officer is able to connect resources, understand and receive information, intel on the emerging patterns, and that's what we have in this case. It's not specific to just Edina, it also kind of ebbs and flows throughout the community or outside of our community. But this officer, this detective, connect the resources and bring in different types of technology, for example, and different resources available to us to help deter and offset and prevent and also enforce the laws that are in place right now. So I would say that we're well positioned to deal with any other upcoming emerging trends that we may see here in this community, but I also want to assure the council here and residents that we're going to aggressively enforce and hold those accountable that are responsible for these crimes. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions for the chief or for Manager Neal, folks, or comments? I know this has been really troublesome to our residents and frightening, frankly. You know, it's something that we want to try to make sure that we nip in the bud here. Member Staunton.
Thanks, Chief, for that overview. I'm curious, and maybe you don't have this with you now, but I'd like to see it in the future if you don't, and that's some sense of a statistical analysis of what's happening trend-wise. I mean, is this rising? Obviously, there is a perception, and it sounds like some reality that things are happening that haven't happened before. But I'd be interested in the magnitude of that and how we're using that statistic to figure out how to prevent future trends.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Staunton, absolutely. I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you that generally speaking, auto thefts in this community are up 25%. So that equates to about 15 additional cases this year as compared to last year. We use that analysis. We do daily briefs and weekly briefs with our crime analysts to take a look at the emerging crime trends, and then we allocate our resources appropriately in the community to respond to that. So it's a preventative tool, but it's also very much a response tool for us to take care of those issues.
And are you seeing similar rises in other types of kind of, I'm not sure even how to categorize it, but armed crime? This kind of, face-to-face or armed burglary or armed assault or those kinds of things?
Sure. So on, I would say serious crimes, what we call aggravated crimes, we're not seeing an uptick in those categories. What we're seeing an uptick in is auto thefts in general. And there's a difference between what we refer to as carjackings versus auto thefts versus burglaries, property crimes versus crimes against persons. We're not seeing an uptick in crimes against persons, robberies, carjackings, things like that. We're seeing an uptick in auto thefts.
So the auto theft tends to be the kind of thing where the vehicle is not occupied at the time it's being stolen.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Councilmember Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Chief. I had one comment and then a request. I think that as a community, when we think about issues like this, it is helpful for the entire community to understand what things they can do to deter crime. And so I do appreciate some of the suggestions that were in the video. One of the things that I would ask us to think about, though, when these things happen, I don't think many people know what to do or what to expect. And so beyond locking your door, parking in the garage, bringing the garage down, not leaving your garage door opener in the car, I think, and you don't have to respond to this now, but I think it would be very beneficial to educate the community on what steps they can take beyond just calling the police. And the example I'll give, in some vehicles, the vehicle is able to be tracked through a service, right? And so if your vehicle has that, it would be great if the owner knows that. And when it happens, then they know what steps to take to just get a jump on the process, rather than a lot of times we just wait for the police to come to really engage. And so I think if we can educate the community on other things we can be doing to help us be more effective, I think that'd be an awesome improvement on what we've done to date.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, thanks for being here tonight. I know you're busy, and I appreciate the efforts that you're making. What is the current census of our police force, numbers of officers?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Anderson, our authorized sworn strength is 57. We're currently at 55 right now.
Okay, and so we're trying to gear up a little bit to get to those two extras.
Correct.
Is there anything that you would view this council as being capable of assisting with or offering you or working through the city manager to make available to you? Is there anything that comes up on your wish list, if you will?
Councilmember Anderson, not at this point in time. I mean, I feel comfortable with our resources and going back to our conversation about leveraging our nearby assets and partners, the force multiplier effect. We work very closely with our partners, and so we can steady up a number of resources in a moment's notice. So I'm very comfortable with that. As the budget conversations unfold over the next year or two, there's that possibility where I could come forward or may come forward, and I'd be more prepared to ask for that in a year or two. But for now, I feel comfortable with where we're at.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks again for being here.
Chief, I had a couple calls over the last 2 days from folks, some of whom wondered, gee, do we have enough officers, to the point that Member Anderson was making, and do you need a larger force? This one person's point was, gee, I think we'd be all pleased to pay more in property tax if we needed to have a larger police force, if that was going to make a difference. Do you have any thoughts you want to share with us on that? Sure,
Mayor. My initial comment to that is it's not feasible to place an officer on every corner of the city, right? And so financially, that's not sustainable. But as crime trends go and patterns emerge, we just have to be adaptive to the changing times. And so there could be that possibility where that ask could come down the road. Over the winter months, we'll be doing some evaluations of our force as well and taking a look at to see if there are any opportunities or needs to increase in other areas. That's a very fluid conversation. So I would say for now, again, we're doing okay. We have the resources in place and our collaborative efforts with the community, and that's why we talked a lot about crime prevention aspects. Working together is how we solve these problems, and so we'll keep pushing on that to work forward on that, move forward on that.
Very good. Thanks, Chief. Another question that has been posited with me was, what about working overtime? Do we, sometimes in the summertime you'll see the state patrol will be out and they'll say, forewarning people, this is a weekend where we're going to really watch for drunken drivers, and they put more people out on the road, more of the forces at work than just a single shift. Have you thought about that at all, and the necessity for doing that, or the advantage of doing that in this kind of circumstance where we're trying to catch some folks that are stealing cars in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. When the need occurs, we absolutely will post for overtime and place those additional resources and, for example, impacted neighborhoods if we need to. And so currently we've been able to modify or move our resources around in this case. But if that resource dries up, then we move into posting overtime to bring officers in for that kind of work as well. And again, I go to leveraging our nearby partners. And so we can get more officers in from other nearby communities or for the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office if needed, if we get to that point as well.
Good. Well, I know people in our community, I think they just feel like it's a terrible violation. Nobody gets hurt. But I was thinking about 20 years ago, probably we had a home broken into, and the room my mother stayed in, the guy stole the TV and threw up on the floor in the room that she was in, and eventually was caught. But all these years, it's just felt like a terrible violation of our privacy and our home. Or lake cottage in that circumstance, and I'm sure for the folks that have had a car taken out of their driveway or more intrusively taken out of their garage, the garage door open, or have somebody walk into their back door and take a set of keys off the kitchen counter in the middle of the night, it's really, really bothersome. So I think that this council, to Member Anderson's point, will do anything it needs to do to help you any way that you think we need to help you to try to get this tamped down and catch the perpetrators and return to the peaceful community that we want it to be.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Manager Neal, anything else?
That's all we have for this topic tonight.
Okay, folks, I'm hopeful that helps some people that may have come tonight with this very issue in mind that wanted to express their concern to the council as well. But certainly I don't mean to foreclose anybody from expressing the concerns that they have or coming up with ideas they might have as we deal with this issue. So I'm going to open it up now for concerns of residents, and if you want to come forward and address the council on a matter that's, I don't consider the matter we just talked about to be on the agenda this evening, so if you want to talk about that, feel free to do so. Anything else that's on your mind other than something that's scheduled for a future public hearing or is otherwise on the agenda this evening, feel free to come forward, give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Paul Thompson, 4244 Crocker Avenue in Morningside. Good evening, Mayor Hovland and council and city staff. I'm here to introduce some other people to talk about safety from a different perspective. We stand supportive of the upcoming climate action plan that you will be discussing and voting on next month. I wanted to give a little history from the people that might not have been on the council back in 2007 when our Project Earth group asked the new Mayor Hovland at a time to form an Energy and Environment Commission. 4 years later, the Project Earth students at a Earth Summit that we had for youth were again asking Mayor Hovland and Mayor Spano from St. Louis Park, it's time to have a climate action plan to protect our future. St. Louis Park has done that. We hope that Edina will be following that next month. And today we have some of the future leaders that are leading now from Project Earth to talk about the reasons why this is so important to take action now, because the safety of our community and the safety of our future depend upon actions, immediate actions now. So I'd like to introduce Georgia Wilson, who has a concert tonight. She couldn't come, so she has a video message for you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Hello, my name is Georgia Wilson. I live on 4204 Alden Drive in Morningside. I am 14 years old and I'm a member of Project Earth. I worry about deforestation because it is taking away the habitats of many of our beloved animals. Not only do trees support our wildlife, trees provide us oxygen and lower the carbon in our atmosphere. Trees also protect our water and conserve our soil. As you can see, trees are very important for the environment and my future as a human being. To solve this, I want to take action, and I want to plant more trees. This is why I am excited about the Edina Climate Action Plan, because they are going to help plant trees and hopefully inspire other communities to do so. I hope that through this, we can make the earth a little bit more green and hopefully preserve my future as a human being. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Thanks for the close-up.
And now I want to introduce one of the students that was here 4 years ago, is now a college graduate and working with the Green Corps, with the VA, on waste sorting and working to reduce our weight. Emma Hudson.
Ms. Hutchins, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Emma Hudson. I live at 7312 Shea Drive. I graduated from Edina High School in 2017 and was heavily involved, as Paul mentioned, in Project Earth. During my senior year, the year that we proposed a climate action plan to the City Council. Since graduating from Loyola University Chicago and moving back to Edina, I reconnected with Paul and Mindy, who are both, as I'm sure you know, passionate and driven leaders in community engagement and environmentalism. Paul and Mindy and the Project Earth leaders graciously invited me to come to their weekly meetings at the high school. And I just wanted to speak to a story that really hit me. One morning, I invited the students to share why they joined Project Earth. And after a little bit of time, people slowly started to raise their hands and expressed their fears and concerns about the future, the fate of our planet, which is our collective home. Hearing these students express their fears with both confidence and vulnerability made me hopeful to be in a room full of young adults, which I know will have an extremely positive impact on the future of this world. But it also made me realize that it can't just be up to them. And we also have a role to play in mitigating the climate crisis and ensuring that there is a livable future for the next generations to come. So it has been 4 years and progress has been made, and I've seen that, and yet the need for a climate action plan remains. So that is what we're here to ask you, and I wholeheartedly support the climate action plan.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchins. Thanks for being here this evening. Thanks for coming back to Edina.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I bet you're supposed to introduce somebody else, huh?
Yes, I'm sorry. Zoya and Sarah will also have comments to make. They are both leaders in Project Earth currently.
Good evening. Would you give us your name and address too, please?
Hi, I'm Sarah Yee. I live on 6232 Brayburn Circle. I'm 14 years old and I'm a member of Project Earth. Climate change is important to me because overconsumption of our resources has destroyed habitat and wildlife populations. To me, our world's landscape is a valuable gift, and I don't think that we should strip it of future generations. This is why I trust Edina's Climate Action Plan, because they will engage our communities to address energy use and agriculture. Please pass the Climate Action Plan next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hello, my name is Zoya Hassan, and I live on 6820 Cheyenne Circle. I am part of Project Earth with the Edina High School. One of the most important reasons why we need climate action is because climate change impacts the availability of clean water for drinking and recreational purposes. The water in Edina is prone to algae, decaying organic material, and chemicals in rivers. Climate change affects the pollution in the water we drink and use. Not only does this affect all of us in Edina, but many generations to come and their health will be impacted. It is essential that we make the change to have clean water as soon as possible. In order to do this, it is crucial to properly dispose of waste by keeping trash, pesticides, and other harmful materials out of the water in Edina. Clean waterways will allow for a healthier community by taking the necessary actions to put an end to water pollution. Waste can enter our rivers and lakes in many different ways, filled with harmful bacteria such as E. coli. Taking action against these issues allows for a healthy and thriving community. Climate change is an urgent and extremely important matter, and we can help starting with Edina. Please approve the Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. My name is Bill Sirks, and that's S-I-E-R-K-S. And I live at 5713 Brook Drive, and I've been an Edina resident for about 30 years. And along with Paul Thompson, I think we were one of the founding members on the Edina Energy and Environment Commission back when it started. And I was on for about 8.5 years, and it was a lot of fun. I think we did some good stuff, but there's lots more to do, which is why I'm here tonight. So I'm here on behalf not just of myself, but of 7 members of the Edina Climate Action Plan team that worked over the spring and summer to help develop the Climate Action Plan that you're going to be considering for approval at your next meeting on December 7th. And the 7 members of the team are Mindy Ayler, Sean Ewan, Sarah Irwin, Janet Katui, Rick Murphy, Paul Thompson, and me. And I have a hard copy of our comment that I'll leave with Jennifer when I'm done. So basically, I just want to make 3 points tonight. The first, I can't say it any better than the students. It's really important for you to pass the Climate Action Plan. We owe it to students and the future generations to give them a chance to have a world and environment that isn't going to see the worst effects of climate change. And to avoid those, the science is very clear that we really need to start taking meaningful action now. And the Climate Action Plan really is a great start. It lays out strategies that are very well researched and supported, and is a really good roadmap to get started in a way that can make a difference. My second point, which is just me, I didn't ask the rest of the team to sign up on this, but I think it's really important for council to authorize and set up an implementation and evaluation team, kind of similar to the climate action team that developed the plan, with members of the community and staff, city staff, and then outside experts. It's going to be really important to look at how these action steps are working, how we're going to implement those. This is a huge lift for anybody to get that many different areas of carbon emissions under control, and to be able to periodically look at how those are being implemented and evaluate what we need to do to modify to continue to advance is going to be really important. And I know the students, Paul and I, we'd all be very eager and I think happy to help work on that with you to make it a success. And the last point I would like to make tonight, and that's strongly supported by everyone on our team, is just a huge shout out and thank you to Grace Hancock of the city staff and Ted Redmond, our consultant with Pale Blue Dot. They were just magnificent in coming up with a really good approach. They were involved with a pretty big team that they had to manage under a very tight timeline. And this issue is one of the most complicated issues you can deal with. And they ended up developing a plan that's actually very, very detailed, comprehensive, and yet understandable to people who aren't experts. So they deserve a really big thank you from not just our team, but our whole community. So thank you very much for your attention and your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sirks. Good to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mike Menzel, and I live at 5410 York Avenue South. I've been a resident there for about 34 years. I am also a retired physician and co-founder of Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. The Climate Action Plan is an impressive document, and I wish to congratulate the Energy Commission, Grace, the Energy or Sustainability Officer for Edina, City Council, and staff for the hundreds of hours that went into this, this document, and I'm hopeful it will pass. Addressing heat, air pollution, West Nile, Lyme disease, and flooding are just 4 components of this Climate Action Plan that need to be addressed, and they represent the biggest health threats to the residents of Edina. When implemented, the Climate Action Plan will result in a much healthier and resilient city. Our youth, who just spoke so eloquently, have the most to lose and are the true leaders in this movement. And Edina is listening. I'd like to suggest that a fund, once the Climate Action Plan is approved, that a fund of $500,000 or so be developed for seed money or incentives to jumpstart the hard work of the implementation, just as St. Louis Park has done. Thanks to the Edina Climate Action Plan, our future is brighter. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Iverson. I'm married to the gentleman who was just up here. I live at 5410 York Avenue South and also have been here in Edina for about 34 years. I'm here tonight to express deep support for this Edina Climate Action Plan that is going to come before you on December 7th. It is an impressive document with goals that will only be achieved unless every single one of us take it seriously and join in to do our part. We must do this for the sake of future generations. These future generations are our own children and grandchildren. This comprehensive plan addresses many different sectors in Edina, and it's written so that there's clear steps and actions that businesses, residents, and government can make to make this happen. One section I'm going to focus on discusses the expectation that by 2050 we can expect a 15% higher average rainfall than we currently receive, and that we will have 30% more heavy precipitation events annually. Increased carbon emissions guarantee highly erratic weather events, as we have seen time and time again. This additional burden of more and heavier rainfall leads to the destruction of infrastructure and parks from catastrophic rainfall events. The park that is just 3 houses down from our home along Minnehaha Creek completely floods over when we receive these torrential rainfalls. We are fortunate to have the park as a flood zone to hold the excess water, but I am certain that many other locations in Edina suffer much greater damage as a result of these events. And of course, Minnehaha Creek completely overwhelms its banks during these storms, resulting in much erosional damage. The Edina Climate Action Plan addresses ways to mitigate flooding events, as well as reducing carbon emissions overall. On another point, I'd like to say that cities are the key to addressing human-caused global warming. Cities can execute plans that reduce carbon emissions. Cities give the okay to build homes, retrofit homes, and develop transit systems to improve community sustainability for everyone. From the ground up, cities can make carbon reductions happen. The good news is that the technology is here. We have the solutions. Our community can implement them and bring about a more sustainable and cheaper way to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iverson. Anyone else on this particular topic? Oh, yes. Or any other topic, too.
Good evening. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I'd love to say something about the climate change stuff, but I've got something else I need to talk about. A block from my house is the former Burley's Salon, now vacant lot site at the corner of Oak Lawn and Valley View Road. So that's 2 blocks east of the intersection of Wooddale and Valley View. This lot has become a big problem. It has been a staging area for construction ever since the Burley's lot was bought. It was used for the City Homes construction project. It was used for the New Horizon Homes construction project. And now it has been used extensively for the 44 View apartments going up on the south side of Valley View, the next block west. And a huge problem with the current apartments going up now is that their setback from the street is so out of whack with anything the city has ever allowed that there is no location on that lot where staging of materials, the crane to lift materials up, cement trucks, they cannot be on the physical lot for that apartment building. And the Burley's lot has become their staging area with materials sometimes of enormous sizes, such as 20-foot long trusses, 20-foot long, 6-foot wide culverts or water retention pipes being lifted up, taken across Valley View, down Valley View to that building. And Valley View Road has been completely closed off 6, and I believe more likely 7 times since that project has started. That has diverted emergency vehicles, police vehicles, school buses, city buses into all the neighboring streets. We have one more project that will be coming up, a duplex to be constructed to the east on Valley View Road by the same developer as the apartment building. And I'm concerned that yet again, Burley's lot will be the staging area for that too. This is not good. It's not good for the neighborhood. It impedes traffic. Why is this being allowed to continue? I'd like to see the lot become someone put a bug in my ear about this, become a city-bought lot that is turned into affordable housing as a single-level duplex for full wheelchair accessibility. That would be an excellent use of that lot. And a former council member put that bug in my ear, by the way. I'd like to see the city buy the lot and do something good with it. And there is no other handicapped, wheelchair accessible, affordable housing in the city. This would be an excellent thing to do with that lot.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Weston.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for bringing everybody in this evening. Anyone else in the Chamber's audience this evening that wishes to speak to the council on a matter of concern to them? Yes, sir.
My name is Wayne Meineke. I've been a resident in Edina for about 40 years.
And Mr. Meineke, your address, please.
6650 Vernon Avenue South, 410.
Thank you.
I'm a professional artist for all of those years, and I have a predisposition that more art is more. And I'm very grateful that you found a path to purchasing the Edina Theater to make more art in Edina. I think it's a good thing. If it's really successful, it will bring, I've never spoken in front of a group of people here before. If it's really successful, it'll bring more foot traffic to the general community, which would be good for all of the participants down there. I do have a suggestion. I was speaking with someone from the city who suggested that this may not possibly be the right audience, but I'm not sure what. I've never been to a city council meeting before, so I'm not understanding that or not. But I thought I'd bring an idea, a suggestion that I think would be helpful. And that is that the funding that you found a path to invest to make that a possibility, if you were to develop going forward a big screen museum, you might create a Friends of organization to be assisting financially, or if it is for profit, you might create a big screen club membership of some kind or another that would contribute financially and then benefit possibly, I'm looking for an idea, benefit possibly by a discounted ticket price. The advantage to it would be that you might recoup some of the money that you've put into making something happen so that it could be applied someplace else. And the other advantage would be that the members would be not just exclusively Edina residents, they'd be through the whole southwest suburbs. And so that project, which is valuable to Edina, would be then financed by the general neighborhood all through South Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, Hopkins. I'm sure that there would be interest in it. And I hope that it's maybe a good contribution, a good idea towards making a good thing happen.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Meineke, for thinking that through and coming in and sharing your idea with us, and we'll pass it on to staff and let them think about it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. For folks that might be listening in, again, the number that you want to call in is 800-374-0221, conference ID 507-9642. Director Benarott, do we have anybody waiting in the queue to speak to the council?
We do. Our first caller tonight is Mr. Andrew Brown. Operator, will you please unmute Mr. Brown's line? And Mr. Brown, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
His line is open.
Mr. Brown, you are with us?
Andrew Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. I guess I would really just urge the council and staff, I think you guys understand the severity of the issue with the crime situation, but this isn't just a scenario of just tamping down and like scourging.
Mr. Brown, hold on a second. We're having a difficult time understanding you, at least I am. I don't know if it's in the transmission or... Yeah, it's maybe your
Can you hear me?
line. Yeah, it was very, very difficult to discern what you were saying.
Okay, so I guess I would just urge the council and staff that, to take a look at the history of what's been going on over the last couple of years. I mean, we've had a high school student just waiting for a school bus maliciously run down with a vehicle on France Avenue. We've had a doctor at the parking lot at Southdale Hospital shot in the head. And now we have, armed with handguns, auto thefts and carjackings. So, I understand that the police chief is working his hardest, and I'm sure the officers are as well. I have no doubt in that. But, and I understand the council has to go by what the experts say. But I think we need to look at this as not just a one-time kind of surge situation. We have a crime problem in Edina, and it's going up. and it's violent. And I personally don't feel safe leaving the house and picking up my son from daycare and worry about that on a regular basis. So I mean, it's going to if this doesn't quell down, I'm going to have to look at other places to go move to, because this is not even satisfactory. This is horrendous, and we really need to recognize that and add officers and get them. I'm sorry, I hate to say this, off the highways and in the neighborhoods to make this happen. So that's my 2 cents. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I do have other callers on the line, but no one is in the queue to speak at this point. As a reminder, if you'd like to speak, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. That will get you in the queue to speak. Again, that's the star, then the number 1, not the pound or asterisk sign. That actually takes you out of the queue. With that, I have our next speaker. Operator, will you please unmute the line of Mr. David Frankel? Mr. Frankel, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
David Frankel, 4510 Lakeview Drive, Edina. I guess to add to Andy Brown's comments, well, he didn't really allude to the fact some of the crime issues in Minneapolis may at some point overflow into Edina, and in particular carjackings, which weren't really completely addressed by the chief. Last weekend alone in Minneapolis, there were 20 armed carjackings. Year to date, Minneapolis has been over 500. And obviously, as we're all aware, we border Minneapolis. A lot of these carjackings, unfortunately, are starting to slide south and southwest in Minneapolis. And I realize there's no crystal ball out there, but the Edina police has to give some comfort level to the citizens of Edina that they're aware of the issue and that maybe they're working with a regional task force similar to the auto theft task force, that something can be done. For example, a suggestion might be to increase police patrols along the border of Minneapolis, such as France and Xerxes, where it's appropriate. The other thing I'd like to see Edina do is to get community policing similar to what's in Brooklyn Park, where our chief Milburn came from. So we must be intimately familiar with the policies that Brooklyn Park uses. Some ideas are more foot patrols when appropriate with weather, and more bike patrols, again, depending on the weather in Edina. But we need to have more visibility of the Edina Police Department, more patrols through communities, so people are aware that they do have a police force that's active. Another issue is using more technology, in particular social media. The police department may not be aware that the social networking platform Nextdoor.com gives the police department of Edina the ability to directly post things like police alerts, crime alerts, directly to Nextdoor without going through the City of Edina's communications department, which makes it a lot faster to inform a community that something is happening, like an auto theft, like a carjacking, and I think that would be very useful. But along the same lines, there is software available to essentially overlay crime with patrol car patrols, so people within the community, if they're interested, could see if the police are patrolling areas that have high crime and when they are patrolling. I realize this is not something you put on the internet, but people who have interest might like to see where these patrols are going. The other thing you talked about is people, unfortunately, are creatures of habit. You're not going to tell them to stop leaving their keys in their car and their garage openers in their vehicles. It's going to be just like with any other education. You're going to have to do it over time, maybe do community meetings. The other thing the city should do is promote Nextdoor. Right now, Nextdoor.com has over 15,000 Edina residents registered. I've been out at the Egan Civic Center, and they promote Nextdoor.com on their community digital billboard in front of their city hall. The other thing, last year I listened to a police officer on the West Coast.
Mr. Frankel, I have to ask you to wrap up your comments here over the 3-minute mark. If you could wrap up your comments, I'd appreciate it.
I'll just make one quick comment. The police officer on the West Coast, he said the best thing he does on patrol is say hi to the residents of his community. The last thing I'd like to ask is the city of Edina going to require city employees, including the Edina Police Department, to have COVID vaccinations? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel.
Again, I do have other people on the line, but no one is indicating a desire to speak. If you would like to provide a comment at this point in the agenda, please press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. That's star, then the number 1. That will get you in the queue to speak. I'm still not seeing anyone. I have a time of 7:55. I would recommend we wait maybe just 30 seconds or so. We've been advertising this quite frequently throughout the meeting before we move on with the agenda.
All right, thank you, Director Benner. We'll wait for you to advise us whether anyone else wants to speak to the council.
I think it's safe for you to move on.
All right, thank you. With the conclusion of community comment, at each city council meeting, we have the city manager respond to community comments that were made the meeting prior. And Manager Neal, do you have anything you want to cover from the last meeting of the city council that were concerns of residents?
I do. Thank you, Your Honor. Next council meetings will be much longer than this one. But we had 2 speakers at our last council meeting. The first was Dr. Federico Rossi, and he was here to talk, like many speakers did tonight, about the climate action plan and asking the council to support the work and effort that went into that plan. The second speaker was Lori Grotz, and she talked about the danger to the environment of chlorides in our water softeners in the community, and wanted the city and the council to consider centralized water softening of some kind. She asked specifically if it was in the budget recommendation that I'm making to you. It is not. It is a very large kind of fundamental expense or investment, depending on how you want to see it, into our infrastructure that we have done really no amount of study on. And we, unlike some communities where they have centralized water softening, where they have a centralized water softening plant, we treat water at 11 different locations. So softening water at 11 different locations is really quite different than how we used to soften water when I worked in Eden Prairie and other communities that do that. So that answers that question, and I think that covers that.
All right. Did Manager Neal's comments prompt any inquiries or comments from council members? All right, we'll move on. The next item is the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to adopt the consent agenda items in a single motion. And that is A through L on sections Roman 6 of the agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda items A through L in section 6 of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. As is our usual practice, the last thing we have on the consent agenda generally is donations that we're dealing with to the city of Edina. We need a supermajority to handle those donations and to accept them. In this particular reporting period, we had 2 donations from folks and one organization, one couple. Keto Dale Garden Club, the sum of $2,300 for noxious weed abatement at Lake Cornelia, and then Dr. William and Diane Kimber, $3,550 for a park bench and trees at Arden Park. Very, very generous gifts by both the Garden Club and Dr. and Mrs. Kimber. So thank you very much, and your names will be appearing on the city website. All right, now on to public hearings. We've got 2 public hearing matters this evening, and Director Milner, our Director of Engineering, has the first matter. And as has been our practice during this pandemic, and as we've moved into hybrid sorts of meetings, we'll hold the public hearing tonight and then hold it open until noon on November 22nd, and then continue the action to the December 7th City Council meeting. And so, Director Milner, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. For tonight, we just want to discuss the vacation of easements at the Pennigan Village. That was a development project from 2 or 3 years ago, and there was a slight change that the council recently approved, and the vacation is embodied in Resolution 2021-109. So the graphic on the left is the southeast corner of the development of Pennigan Park. It's south of 77th Street. It's at the corner of Viking Drive and Computer Avenue. So that was previously hotels that were going to be there, and then you recently approved an apartment building. So that little red box there in the left-hand side is a 20 by 20 area that the applicant wants vacated, that they created drainage utility easement for the hotels. It's no longer needed, so they are requesting a vacation of it. They'll build the apartments, and if we need additional easements, they will grant those easements. So it's in that area near Viking Drive and Computer area in the red box. We have no issues with it. There's no city utilities there. There's no private utilities in that area. So both the city and the private utilities support it. And we would recommend you make a motion to close the public hearing at noon on Monday, November 22nd, and continue this action until December 7th City Council meeting, and stand for any questions.
All right, questions for Director Milner on this particular matter? Seems fairly straightforward. Thank you, Director Milner. Stand by. I'm going to open this now up for public testimony. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to testify regarding this matter? All right, seeing no one coming forward, hearing nothing, is there anyone online that wishes to testify regarding this matter? Again, folks, you can see the number on the screen if you're tuning in virtually, 800-374-0221, conference ID 507-9642. Director Benarott, anybody with us?
I do have someone on the line, but no one in the queue to speak. Again, if you'd like to speak, please press *1 on your telephone keypad to get into the queue. Again, we have been advertising that quite frequently. Let's just wait 30 seconds or so before moving on.
Very good. Thank you.
I think it would be safe for you to move on now.
Thank you, Director Benarott. With respect to Resolution 2021-109, which would be a potential right-of-way easement vacation at Pennigan Village, as described by Director Milner, is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on November 22nd and continue action to the December 7th City Council meeting on this matter?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, a second by Member Pierce to adopt Resolution 2021-109, which would close the public hearing on this matter at noon on November 22nd and continue it for action at the December 7th City Council meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. One other public hearing matter involves the issuance and reissuance of bonds, and this generally requires public input, and Alicia McAndrews, our finance director, I think is going to handle this matter.
My apologies for being late.
Welcome.
Thank you. I was talking to Bill outside. But for the public agenda item that we have, the public hearing agenda item, this relates to the item that we have on the report and presentations, where Nick Anhut will be with us and discussing the upcoming bond sale that actually happened today, so he'll be presenting the results. But this public hearing item is more of a procedural piece. Because the private activity that occurs in the Braemar Arena, in order to execute the refunding of the bonds, we need to do a public hearing and file an IRS form. And so this is on the agenda before us because of guidance from our legal counsel at Dorsey. So I think we open the public hearing and close it.
And I think, Your Honor, would ask the council to close the public hearing this evening. This is a little...
Yeah, I understood that, but I think there's a little bit more explanation required as to what the purpose of the public hearing is.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the purpose of the public hearing is because of the, to maintain the 501c3 status of the bonds. And so in order to do that, we need to hold a public hearing and then file a form with the IRS.
Okay. So you've got a proposed reissuance and issuance of general obligation bonds. You have them qualified as 501c3 bonds?
Correct.
And that requires a public hearing and then potentially adoption of a resolution. Manager Neal, did you have anything further? Okay, good. All right, stand by. And we will open this matter up for public testimony. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to testify regarding this matter? Okay, seeing no one coming forward. Is there anyone online that wishes to testify regarding this matter? The public hearing aspects of this matter is now open.
I have no one on the line at all anymore, so I think it's safe for you to move on.
All right, very good. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
You got a motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Pierce to close the public hearing in this matter. Any further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then Ms. McAndrews, our finance director, would like an authorizing resolution, and that is to adopt resolution 2021-108, which would authorize the reissuance of $2,100,000 in GO bonds, Series 212C, and the issuance of $1,125,000 in GO bonds, Series 2013B, to get them qualified as 501c3 bonds. Is that a fair summary?
That's a fair summary.
Okay. Or is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second. All right, we got a motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Anderson. To the motion as stated. All those in favor of adoption of resolution? Yes, discussion? Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I just, if Mr. Kendall could help us, I know that you're not a bond attorney, but I'm a little confused by the 501c3 designation. These are tax-exempt bonds, but that's an income tax for the entity. I've never heard them called 501c3 bonds again. Can we just spell that out a little bit, please?
I think the key word there is qualified 501c3. So they have the same qualities of a 501c3 bond. So they're related to the tax-exempt
because
financing.
they're a revenue bond and not a...
They're a revenue. Oh, I'm sorry. They're a revenue bond, and there's private activity at the arena with the Hockey Association and Skating Association, and so it's to protect that status.
The two retail stores.
But it doesn't affect the tax-exempt status of the bonds at all.
Okay, so but it's a different flavor of bonds than the bonds that were issued for the City Hall, for instance.
Correct.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, good. Thank you, Member Jackson. All right, good question. All right, we've got a motion and a second on the adoption of resolution 2021-108 as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of resolution 2021-108, which has certain authorizing elements in it related to some GO bonds. Everybody in favor of that say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on now to reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. And now we have Grace Hancock with us, our sustainability manager. You heard folks talking about her earlier and giving her all types of praise, folks that are working with her in the community. And she has a presentation for us this evening on something we've been talking about, and that is the sustainable buildings policy. So Ms. Hancock, welcome.
I have a few items to share with you. And first on the docket is Edina Sustainable Buildings Policy Proposal. So I want to briefly introduce the topic to you and cover key points, then ask you to tonight approve this policy for implementation in 2022. So a reminder, why is Edina interested in a sustainable buildings policy? Edina does already have greenhouse gas emission reduction goals to respond to climate change. The building and the energy codes at the state level alone are not sufficient for Edina to meet our climate goals. And while we do track building operations via the Efficient Buildings Benchmarking Program, buildings designed sustainably are more likely to meet these efficiency targets. So to address this, staff proposes a twofold policy. For any new construction and major renovations that trigger this policy, they must, 1, be certified under an eligible sustainable buildings rating system, and 2, they must meet the standards outlined in the Edina overlay. The staff proposal is structured to maximize effectiveness and minimize additional workloads for those involved. This policy will affect around 2/3 of large development proposals in Edina. Thanks to a partnership with the county, staff and developments benefit from outside support and technical expertise. And the policy elements proposed here have the potential to strongly shift those emissions that come out of buildings, which reduces the economic and environmental costs of developments. So here are the policy triggers when a new development would need to come into compliance with this policy. Either a new or renovating development that seeks a PUD or some sort of financial incentive. For the first part of compliance, staff proposes 4 certification pathways that the developer can choose from, depending on their development type and familiarity or preference with a particular rating system. For the second part of compliance, we ask that developments, no matter the rating system they choose, incorporate 4 key aspects of sustainability into their buildings. Designing to ambitious energy standards and calculating expected greenhouse gas emissions, and installing EV chargers and bird-safe window glazing. When it comes to implementation, Edina is well positioned to incorporate this new policy into existing practices, so to minimize additional workload for developments and city staff. Staff does recommend an April 1st, 2022 effective date. And with that, thank you. I welcome your questions.
All right. Questions for Ms. Hancock? Anyone? Something we've been talking about here for quite some time. Yeah, Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Ms. Hancock, when you gave this presentation to us previously, you had a rather stunning statistic about some new buildings that we've learned about under our benchmarking policy. Do you have that statistic with you at your fingertips?
Yes, I do. I think what you're referring to is, building standards have changed at the state level. Over the last 20 years, they have become more aggressive when it comes to energy efficiency. However, we have not seen that reflected in the data recorded related to our efficient building benchmarking ordinance. In the last 10 years, buildings have not proven to be more efficient despite these state building codes, which really points to a need to this local intervention as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And thanks for the good work on this.
All right. So the action requested is, let me hold on here, on the right page, is to approve the sustainable building policy effective April 1, 2022. Is that correct, Ms. Hancock?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the sustainable buildings policy effective April 1, 2022?
So moved.
All right. Motion by Member Jackson. Second?
Second.
Second by Member Pierce. The motion and the second deal with approving the sustainable buildings policy that Ms. Hancock has given us a summary of just a short time ago, and make it effective April 1, 2022. Is there any further discussion by council members? All right. All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now you have the next matter as well. Ms. Hancock.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your attentiveness to a few different sustainability items this evening. The second proposal relates still to buildings, but the existing efficient building benchmarking ordinance and 3 proposed amendments to that ordinance. So to ground us all in the same information, Edina passed this ordinance in 2019. 2020 was the first year that it came into effect. This ordinance requires that buildings 25,000 square feet or larger must submit annual energy use data to the city, and those with efficiency opportunity will begin to undergo energy assessments starting next year. Separately from this item, you received an annual efficient buildings benchmarking report and program evaluation. 2 years in, we see a few key opportunities to improve this ordinance, both in effect and in simplicity to understand. Staff then proposes 3 ordinance amendments here: collecting water use data, updating definitions, and clarifying the exemptions list. So I'll walk through these briefly. Collecting water use data. This amendment brings Edina in line with neighboring city requirements and expands the environmental resource information the city can analyze and that the building owner can access to improve efficiency. This is the most material ordinance amendment proposal of the 3. The second is just to update definitions. Staff proposes to add 2 new definitions, update 2 existing definitions, and reorder 1 definition into its alphabetical place. These definition updates are directly related to building owner confusion when attempting to comply with this ordinance. This amendment will increase understanding and reduce workload for everyone involved. Finally, is to clarify the exemptions list. This ordinance exempts industrial buildings, but does not clearly define the term industrial, and it doesn't describe a process for industrial buildings to affirm their exemption. This update streamlines the process for implementing so that staff and building owners can more easily move through the compliance with this ordinance. These changes will have limited effects on staff workloads or building owners' efforts to comply. Requiring water inputs will increase these efforts slightly, but we have seen the volume of calls and emails about exemptions and definitions that will surely decrease thanks to these clarifications. So thank you, and with that, I ask you to consider adopting these ordinance amendments.
Questions for Ms. Hancock on these proposed amendments? Yes, Council Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you again for the work on this. My first thing is a comment. Actually, I just want to tell people who don't remember the history that the reason we put the exemption for the industrial use in there is that one of our energy environment members made a really good point that for industrial uses, the amount of energy they use is often a trade secret. And so that's why that exemption is in there, and I'm glad to see this clarification and better definition. But for anybody who's wondering why we exempt them at all, is to protect their trade secrets and their way of doing business, or their secrets to doing business. The second thing is a question. So it sounds like some of our property holders also have properties in other cities where they are reporting the water. Is that kind of the prompt for one of the prompts for adding that data at this point?
Absolutely. Edina is part of what's called the Hennepin County Efficient Buildings Collaborative, where partner cities who also have similar environmental regulations can come together and work on how we can streamline our requirements. So in this case, St. Louis Park and St. Paul both have a similar ordinance on the books. They both require water, and we were finding this last year that our building owners were confused. They wanted to know where could they input their Edina water use. And so in speaking to that ambiguity and in an effort to streamline across the jurisdictions, we propose this amendment.
Okay, terrific. And then with our new water billing software, does that help that gathering of that data as well?
Eventually.
Okay.
Right now, if a customer is subscribed to online billing, they can access their historical water use at any time. If they are not, they can call the city and receive those quarterly statements. So they have four inputs per year that they put in. Eventually, with the changeover in technology, it should be easy for any customer to access that information.
Terrific. Thank you so much, and thanks for your good work on this as well.
All right, I think Ms. Hancock has provided us with a red line version of the ordinance 2021-14 in its amended form. Does anyone else have further questions from the council? Otherwise, entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2021-14, which amends Chapter 20 of the Edina City Code concerning large building benchmarking. Grant first reading and waive second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Stoughton, approving ordinance 2021-14, which would amend Chapter 20 of the Edina City Code concerning large building benchmarking, granting first reading and waiving second reading. Any further discussion on this matter by council members? All right, all those in favor of the motion as stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we're going to move on to Sharon Allison, who has the next matter, our city clerk, which would approve the summary publication for ordinance 2021-14, which would amend Chapter 20 of the Edina City Code, the matter we just talked about concerning large building benchmarking. Clerk
Yes.
Allison?
By statute, we are required to publicize any new or amended ordinance, and this is a cost-effective way for us to advertise this ordinance that you've just approved in an amended, a summary version, I should say, and it requires a 4/5 approval by the council to do so.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Clerk Allison on this matter? Is there a motion to approve the summary publication for the matter we just dealt with, ordinance number 2021-14?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Jackson to approve the summary publication for ordinance 2021-14. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And next we have back to the world of bonds. And Alicia McAndrews, our finance director, is going to come back up. Nick Anhut from Ellers, our public finance advisory group, and Mr. Anhut, the person who serves us so well from that group, they've got some interesting information tonight, I'm sure, with respect to some bonding work that we were doing. Ms. McAndrews, welcome back.
Thank you. One moment. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint presentation.
Is Mr. Anhut with us online?
He is going to join us via web.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, there you are. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the flexibility. I apologize for not being there in person as intended, but I'm here to deliver some good news, and we certainly have that tonight. Proposed in front of the council is the potential refinancing, or what's called a refunding, of two series of bonds, both bonds that are outstanding on the city's books as of today's date, relating to various infrastructure and facility projects that the city has funded in the past. But before I dive right in, I would like to offer my congratulations that the city's credit rating has been affirmed by both Moody's Investors Service and S&P Global Ratings. They both hold AAA status for the city's financial and economic profile, meaning that they place you in the very top echelon of all municipalities and really any other type of entity that they rate across the globe. This does place you in the top 5 to 7 percentile amongst all municipalities in the United States, and it is a lofty credit rating that you have held as far back as the year 2000 with Moody's Investors Service and defended it well, and then 2003 with S&P. I will go over a brief summary of the reports, but both largely mirror each other. They are impressed with the city's large and affluent tax base, and also your resiliency, certainly during the pandemic and the recessionary pressures that have unfolded. They note that despite all of this, the tax base within the community, in part due to your investments, is continuing to grow and has witnessed limited impacts as far as employment and other impacts to that base. They also note that you are a very strong financial profile, meaning that you are a budget conservatively, are able to maintain appropriate reserves that can serve you well in time of a need for resiliency, and that you have ample liquidity in order to cover during those impacts. As far as a challenge from Moody's, the only thing that they note is that compared to other AAA entities, the city of Edina does carry an above average leveraged or fixed costs related to its debt as well as pension liabilities. However, they note within the report that they do not see that in and of itself serving as any kind of pressure on your AAA rating. It's merely one thing that they're able to identify that doesn't place you at the top of the heap. As far as S&P is concerned, again, largely the same. Within their evaluation, they note that you've got a diverse economy that's not just residential, but also a vibrant commercial sector. And it's independently strong from what is also considered a vibrant economy within the larger metro area. They also noted within the report a very responsive and forward-looking management, which includes the policies that the council adopts, as well as some of the implementation from the city's staff. Certainly, they looked very favorably upon some of the efforts that the city took within its budgets over the course of the last year and a half in trying to make sure that there were not going to be any potential implications from the impact of the pandemic. Again, they know very strong liquidity and fund balance positions, very strong history of budgetary performance, and they actually say that your debt and contingent liability profile is strong relative to your peers. So perhaps a little dispute, but I think they're both in line, Moody's and S&P. S&P's report notes that as far as a downside scenario, they deem very unlikely that there would be any deterioration of the community, but they do note that they could downgrade the city if there were what they say is a significant financial deterioration, which I would assume to mean multiple years of deteriorated financial performance. So you're on very good track to maintain these ratings going forward into the future. It is with these credit ratings that we're able to actually go out into the marketplace. We attach these credit ratings to an offering document that is reviewed by various underwriters within the municipal bond community. And they are able to deem that the city of Edina is going to make good on its promise to repay its debt. And so they can offer you the lowest potential financing rates that are available in the marketplace. And we're seeking to take advantage of that this evening for some of the city's existing debt. We have two series of bonds that are proposed. One series called 2021B is a refunding or a refinancing of bonds that were originally issued in 2013 for a portion of the city's public works facility, as well as the city's annual street reconstruction projects from that year. There are 8 years remaining on that debt, and we're seeking to refinance it at low interest rates that are observed in today's marketplace. Those bonds are repaid from a dedicated tax levy, as well as special assessments from the reconstruction projects. The other series of bonds is actually a combination of refinancing two existing city bond issues, 2012B and 2013B, both of which have been issued to provide funding for the city's enterprise or recreational enterprises, one for the Braemar Ice Arena and the other for the reconstruction of the Gulf Dome back in 2013. There are 11 years in total remaining amongst these two bonds, and we're again seeking a refinancing in order to obtain lower interest expense and lower your annual debt service payments. These both are a public offering of bonds through a competitive bidding process, and I'm here to present what we received as far as those bids. For the B series of bonds, we received 3 bids with the low bid at 0.9459%. The high bid came in just a hair above 1%. This is the total interest expense of the full 8-year repayment on these bonds. The 3 proposals received were from Baird, the winning bid, as well as Raymond James and Piper Sandler and Co. With the Baird bid in hand, we're able to actually reduce the sizing of the bond to $3,795,000. That adjusts for a premium that they included within their bid proposal. And as a result, if the council does move forward, we'll be able to lock in a net savings of $360,000 from what you are paying today on that existing debt. This represents a 7.2% reduction in your overall cost associated with those 2013 bonds. For the C Series, we received only 2 proposals. We didn't get one from Raymond James, but we did receive a very competitive proposal from Baird as well as Piper Sandler. Low bid coming in at 1.17% and the high at 1.28. These bids were actually quite a bit in line with the bids that were received for the previous issue. It's just that these are actually a longer duration. These are repaid over 11 years instead of 8. And so the higher rate is reflective of that longer duration. Again, these are very great bids. They are much lower than our expectations. And with the final sizing on this issue, we're able to size it at $2.21 million. That adjusts for the premium within Baird's bid, and we'll be able to lock in savings of $181,000 realized over that 11-year repayment, coming from the Ice Arena Fund as well as the Braemar Golf Fund. This represents a 6.5% net savings on the existing debt service for those 2 bonds being refinanced. So with that, I'll stand for any questions, but for the council's consideration this evening is resolutions authorizing the issuance and awarding the sale of these 2 series of bonds, the 21B as well as the 21C series. It will lock in the rates and terms proposed from the winning bids of our competitive sales, both of which were won by Baird. And we'll be able to move ahead and schedule a closing for December 16th, which is when the funds will be wired into the city's accounts to pay off the old debt and replace it with the new bonds at the much lower rates and achieve those savings. So very, very good results. We're very pleased with these, and I certainly recommend that the council move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anhut. Council members, questions or comments? It's always good to get that affirmation. Manager Neal, you may have a few comments getting that affirmation from the 2 rating agencies that we continue this AAA rating of ours, which lets us borrow at such low rates when we have to do some borrowing.
I do. Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, the ratings that we received are the best ratings that they can grant, so we're grateful for that. I think it's important to know that they're looking not only at our financial practices, but they're also looking at the strength of the community, and they're also looking at management, how city staff and council interact together and have created this environment that is so financially strong. Those are important things to remember, that our behavior and the way that we work together is a factor that's considered by credit rating agencies. It's important to know that. I will tell you that this is a refunding that we have been working toward and anticipating, and the cost savings that we are going to achieve through this are going to help us mitigate our property tax revenues as early as, property tax rates as early as next year. So when we begin to meet with you individually to kind of go over the last stage of the budget process, we'll show you how this fits into that budget picture as early as 2022.
All right, thank you, Manager Neal. Council members, comments or questions? Member Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just again to thank both Director McAndrews and Mr. Anhut for the timeliness and finding the opportunity to save our town a fair amount of money over a prolonged period of time. I appreciate your proactive hard work on that. Thank you.
Member Jackson?
Do we have any other bonds we can get at 0.9%? Holy Toledo. Good work, team. That's just stunning.
It might be the best we've ever done.
Yeah, Mr. Anhut, you can't see. I don't know if you can see me, but I was grasping my sweater the whole time, like, holy cow, I can't believe those rates. That's mind-blowing. So congratulations, and thank you for saving us money.
Yeah, Mr. Anhut, just want to confirm one thing from the it was the Moody's report where, they expressed, they're not questioning the AAA status, but they said, well, here's a few things to be mindful of. And one was, they mentioned the debt. But they do opine in here, I'm looking at page 3 of their report, that the city's total fixed costs, inclusive of debt service, pension contributions, and other employee benefit costs, typically hover around the 20% of revenue mark. Here was the one that I wanted to get to, was the debt structure. All the city's debt is long-term and fixed rate, with more than 80% of the principal of that collective debt, which I think is in the $75 million range, scheduled to be retired within 10 years. Can you verify that for us, or Director McAndrew? I know that's the schedule we've talked about being on in the past, but that's been a goal of ours to get that debt reduced.
Yes, that they do note that, and within their criteria, they don't just look at the overall size of debt that the community holds, but also the flexibility to repay that debt quickly. And so when they do note that you're above, I believe, 65% amortized in 10 years, they do give you some bonus points for that within your credit evaluation. They see that as a strength, that you'll be able to potentially either reduce budgets or replace that to continue funding much needed projects in the future, and you're not, fixing this burden for 20, 30, 40 years in some instances for certain facilities. So they do see that as a strength.
Yeah, good, thank you. Does that prompt any questions from anybody else on the council? Director McAndrews wanted 2 resolutions passed. One is resolution number 2021-107 and 2021-108. I think we can handle them in a single motion. Is there a motion to approve resolutions 2021-108 awarding the sale of 4.62 million general obligation refunding bonds, series 2021B, and resolution 2021-107 awarding the sale of 2.43 million general obligation recreational revenue bonds, series 2021C, with the award of purchase for each bond going to Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, motion by Member Anderson, second by Member Jackson. All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mr. Anhut, thanks for being with us. And Director McAndrew, thanks for being with us this evening as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the next matter on the agenda is something we've been working on as well. And Bill Neuendorf, our Economic Development Manager, has this matter. And this is the potential adoption of a spending plan. All started with the state legislature, trying to help stimulate the economy as we come out of the pandemic. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Neuendorf, to explain to folks at home and in the audience what this is all about.
Sure, yes, good evening. And I have a presentation in the packet. I can go through it if that's helpful. But what we have this evening is Resolution 2021-13. This recommends that the city adopt a spending plan for unobligated tax incremental funds that are contained in the Southdale 2 District, the Pentagon Park District, and the Wooddale Valley View District. These are funds that have already been collected and are in those accounts. And recent changes in state law allows the city to take those dollars and invest them in new redevelopment projects. These are new projects that either build new construction or significantly rehab existing buildings. In order to create a budget and use those dollars for projects to be determined, we need to adopt a spending plan. And that's what has been prepared. We held a public hearing at our last meeting, and we're here tonight to move this for consideration. Along with the resolution, staff also has prepared a policy to provide some guidance as we select projects in the future. We'd also recommend that policy be approved this evening. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you may have. If not, we'll move it back to you.
Questions for Manager Neuendorf on this matter? This is something we covered the last couple of meetings. All right, this is not a public hearing matter. We've got a couple of motions here that Manager Neuendorf would like to have us pass. One is the motion approving Resolution 2021-105, which would adopt a spending plan for those 3 identified tax increment financing districts, Southdale 2, Pentagon Park, and 70th and Cahill, and then also approve the policy for use of unobligated tax increment financing funds. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second. Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce, to approve Resolution 2021-105, which adopts a spending plan for the Southdale 2, Pentagon Park and 70th and Cahill tax increment financing districts and approves the policy for use of unobligated tax increment financing funds from those 3 districts. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, a couple more items in this portion of the agenda. The next one is one that has come back around to us because of the pandemic and increased construction costs and supply chain problems, and we approved this project at 70th and France probably over a year ago. And now it's come back to us in an amended form. And I think Manager Neuendorf, Director Teague has this matter. So, Director Teague.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So as mentioned, this is a revision to the plans that you all have approved. The key elements that remain with this project compared to the project that you already approved is the dividing the site into 4 smaller parcels consistent with the design experience guidelines. That the property has been platted and easements are in place to divide those 4 parcels up. Specifically, the revisions, there's a reduction in the number of units from 380 to 267. The grocery store has been eliminated. You may recall that had an impact to the traffic study. That right turn lane on France Avenue is no longer needed at this time because of the reduction in units, and the grocer eliminated. Maybe in the future that's needed depending on development outside of this one, to be determined as part of future studies for other projects. There's an improvement to the Pocket Park. You recall it's been shifted to the west side of the north-south internal roadway. There's better pedestrian movement along that north-south interior road because there's no access into the parking garages on either side. With this one, the Planning Commission did recommend denial. Their concerns were over removal of the affordable housing within the project. Where the affordable housing was to be located has been replaced by a freestanding parking structure with no liner building, so they had concern with that. And concerns with the street typology, particularly along 70th Street. Staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the resolution. So you've got 2 resolutions before you, a denial resolution and an approval resolution. Staff still does believe that the PUD criteria are satisfied here. They are following the spirit of the design experience guidelines. You recall that those design experience guidelines aren't city code. They're really designed to start a discussion for developments as they move through the process. In terms of notable conditions, the affordable housing at this point is the buy-in. In the amount, it would be $3.4 million based on the number of units that would be required. They would still have an option. They still have to come back for final approvals of the housing. They might have an alternative at that point, but as of today, it appears that the buy-in would be required. Park dedication is required here at $5,000 per unit. That's about a $1.3 million dedication. That's due at the time of a building permit for the residential piece. In terms of those internal streets, a question came up on Better Together about who builds and maintains those. That is up to the developer has to build those streets and maintain them in the future. There is a public easement that would be that already actually exists over those internal streets and sidewalks for public access. As mentioned, we did receive quite a few responses to Better Together, both for and against. Those that don't like the project, they didn't like the change with the removal of the affordable housing, didn't like to see the plans being changed so soon, concerns over height, concerns over meeting the design experience guidelines and the traffic study. And those that were in favor expressed appreciation for the vibrancy that this project would bring to the Southdale district, more retail options, and just general activity. So with that, staff is recommending that you adopt Resolution 2021-03 and adopt Ordinance 2021-13 that would approve the project. The development team is here in the audience, and I believe there's also a couple online to answer any questions that you might have otherwise.
Good. Thank you, Director Teague. I think Member Staunton has a question for you, or
potentially
the developer.
For Director Teague, you mentioned that the Planning Commission recommended denial based on the design experience guidelines issues, one of which was the street typology on 70th Street. My question is whether that is different from what was in the original plan.
It is different from the original plan. There's a little more articulation along 70th Street.
So I guess what I was getting at is, was the street typology conforming with the design experience guidelines in the first version?
They actually were not. The building didn't step back as far
so
as it
steps
rises.
back further now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Director Teague or comments on this matter? I think it might be worth a good conversation at the council level before we have a motion. Member Jackson and then Member Anderson.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have quite a bit of comments. I guess one question I had is, the idea that the streets are going to be public. So because there's a public easement, the public can come and go on those streets, and that protects their right to be there. Is that correct?
That is correct, and also provides access for the property to the south, should that develop in the future, and the property to the east, should that develop in the future.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start my comments here with the public hearing. I heard three distinct voices in this discussion. The first one was from people who are unhappy with large amounts of change in the Southdale area. And I think it's a very human reaction that what we're looking at is a big change, but it's also one that's envisioned in our comprehensive plan. And essentially what they are saying is that they disagree with the Southdale area plan and are not pleased with this level of development. And like I said, I totally understand that's a lot of change. But I also know that our comprehensive plan is a plan to manage change so that change doesn't manage us. And so that's the first voice. The second voice I heard is that this area really does need redevelopment. One thing that we need is some Class A office space. And I was struck by the comments about our bonding capabilities and strength, that we have a diverse economy. And I know that we haven't had, we've actually lost businesses to other communities because we don't have that new Class A office space. One thing that I would like to see is have the Planning Commission in their analysis of the parking ordinance to get some stakeholder input. I am really kind of baffled by our consultant is saying one level of parking is needed for commercial office buildings, and the leasing agent for this is saying something different. And I would really like to have a robust stakeholder discussion about that, because I don't know, it is confusing and it's difficult to analyze without having heard that in a neutral forum. And then the third voice was the voice of the Planning Commission, and other people have written this in, that replacing the workforce housing with a parking garage is a reason to reject this. So those are the three voices that I heard. There were two things I did not hear, and that was I wish there would have been more discussion and some decisions made about the building materials on the ground floor per the Southdale Experience Guidelines, and then also the street room typology on 70th Street. And so you look like you might have an answer to that, Mr. Teague.
I do, yes. There wasn't a lot of discussion, but it is in the conditions of approval for the approval resolution that they do need to meet that building material requirement when they come back for final approvals.
Okay, terrific. And then the other thing I didn't hear, which I thought was interesting, is there was no call for public art in this development. And that's something that I have heard from members of the Arts and Culture Commission, and something that I'd like to have included as a condition. So having heard these three voices and thought about it, I've been thinking about this a lot. When I ran for office, I actually made a video standing in the parking lot of this building before the original proposal came forward to the city, saying that this is going to set the tone for our Southdale area. This corner, 70th and France, is the heart of the Southdale district and probably the most important corner. And I remember the city council actually saying that at the time as well when the proposal came forward. So this is really important to me, and the tone that we set. And first of all, the breaking down of the blocks into the 200-foot blocks and the interior streets, and looking at the street room typology, I think is really important, and I believe that they've done this. But I have to say that the first plan that was approved, I was not really excited about. And I have some things I liked and things I didn't like. But the things I didn't like is at the corner of 70th and France, which really is the heart of this, it was a parking garage over retail. And even though it was a very beautiful parking garage with the copper lining and everything, it was still a parking garage. And I don't think that that should be the face that we put forward. So I'm really pleased that that has changed. The second thing I didn't like was that new right turn lane. I know when we looked at a previous development in this neighborhood, one of the concerns is how are people going to walk to the Southdale area when they have to cross so many lanes of traffic on France. And so that right turn lane just made that crossing all that more difficult. This is in the previous plan. And then the pocket park was a good idea, but it was also shaded, and I just couldn't envision how people would use that. Things I did like about the previous plan were the mixed use, the 200-foot grid, which I referenced, and then the fact that there was workforce housing. So I understand the Planning Commission being disappointed that the workforce housing went away, but I think that the improvements outweigh that. Basically what I heard from the Planning Commission and from McJohnson's report was that they were sad that the workforce housing units weren't being built, that the parking lot is not a future-looking use, and that this is not an environmentally future-looking project. And I think some of those things were unfair, especially the comments by the Architecture Field Office about the environment, because I think this plan is going to comply with our green building or sustainable building policy, which is green and environmentally sensitive. I think that if a developer complies with our affordable housing policy, that's not grounds for rejection. We may need to look at the policy, and I think I talked to Manager Neal briefly about this. If we want to have the choice in the hands of the City Council instead of in the developer, that's a policy decision we need to have separately, not at this time. And it's not fair to put the developer in the position of not knowing what our policy is. So if they're going to comply with the affordable building or the affordable housing policy, I think that that's not grounds for rejection. Same with the green building policy. If they're going to comply with the green building policy, and yes, hooray, it is now officially our policy, I think that is de facto a sustainable building and not grounds for rejecting a proposal. So I have a number of reasons why I like this better than the previous proposal and why I'm supporting it. There's less building mass here. Light and air are very important to me. And I think this will bring a lot more light and air. I think especially with that pocket park, the way it's set up, it will have a lot more sunlight to it, and it will have a lot more light, more uses. And by moving it over there and redesigning Ewing to be much more of a foot traffic type of street rather than a car traffic street, I think that's a really big improvement. And will and that with the pop-up retail really bring a lot of activity that otherwise would not have been the same. I am just so very, very pleased to see an office building that's world-class at the corner of 70th and France with that retail underneath. I think the use and activity of that space is a dramatic improvement on this project. So if the previous setup of the 4 plats and the basic size of buildings were okay in 2020, they're still okay, and they're vastly improved with this activation at the corner. And I can't stress strongly enough what an improvement that is. The parking is very difficult. I understand the concern, but I took a deep look at this from several different ways. And in the previous plan, there were 560 parking places in that lot that was built within the commercial office building. Now there are fewer spots, and they're in a standalone parking garage, 540. If we reach a time where people aren't driving to work anymore, where people are walking, biking, taking public transit, and the need for parking goes down, if we had built the previous development, we would still have all those parking spots because they were an integral part of the building. By taking them out and making them a separate building, that gives us flexibility for that day when we are traveling by bus, by transit, by who knows, maybe there's going to be a tram coming down the middle of France Avenue in 20 years. It could be beautiful, but we would still have all those parking places in the previous plan. And now we can take it apart like Legos. Take it apart, move it someplace else, and build it as a different structure someplace else. So it's not only future looking in terms of its adaptability, but also in its deconstruction will create less waste. And when we're dealing with concrete, the less we can make new concrete, the better. It's a very high producer of greenhouse gases. So I think, it's got that retail space activation on the first floor. So if we do want to get rid of one floor of the parking, we can make that, or not we won't be operating it, but the owner can operate that as a retail space. It has that flexibility. And then we got an email from the developer this week saying that they are intending to install solar. And I think as part of in our work plan, our work session today, we talked about how can we move the dial on greenhouse gases. Well, we start installing solar, and today we get have the opportunity to have that solar built in the parking garage. The pocket park, I mentioned that. I know that one of the people in the public hearing was concerned that it wouldn't be seen from the street. People wouldn't know it's there. But I think it creates the opportunity for kind of a small area. I think of like in European cities, they have holiday festivals where their little vendors come out and there's stuff to do and buy and to go visit. And I can totally see that happening here in this space. And so, I go back and forth. Should it be grass and green and trees, or should it be as it's designed? But I think as it's designed, it does create a new public space for a different type of use than we currently have in the city. I don't see it as a neighborhood park so much as an activity place. And I think that's kind of exciting, especially with the more light and air in this design and the redesign of viewing. Again, I'm really pleased to see the removal of the right turn lane on France, and that's a good thing for pedestrian traffic. The retail space. So I used to be in retail a million years ago, and so I kind of follow what's going on. And the future of retail space is not as many bricks and mortar stores. It's not just online shopping, but it's also these sort of short-term leases. And one of the things I've heard from people in the community is concern about the high rent and the high risk of starting a business in Edina. And when you've got a retail idea and you have to sign a long-term lease in order to have a store, that is a very, very high barrier to entry. With these pop-up spaces that are flexible and short-term, we can have some real innovation in retail. And if these ideas take off, we've got these beautiful sites where they can go have more permanent stores. But I really think that the future of retail, and I think one of the development team talked about Nashville. I've heard about this in New York City. I really think that's a future, and I'm excited to have that opportunity right here in our retail area of the city. And then finally, the creation of the Class A office space. It really has been since Centennial Lakes that we've had Class A office space created. So I am very much in favor of this. I think it's an improvement on the previous plan. I think $3.4 million for our affordable housing fund is not a small amount of change. I know the emphasis is on making the units, building the units, but this is not, we're not walking away with nothing. This is a considerable amount of cash. And that's really flexible use too. That's much more flexible than the development of units that only last 20 years. So we can get some permanency with that too. There are a couple of conditions I would like to see added to this, and I may be covered by the conditions that are in there, but one is approval or compliance with the green building policy. The second is to actually have the solar installation in the parking garage, and the third is to include public art valued at least $100,000. So with those conditions, I am very strongly in favor of this project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member Jackson, for those thoughtful comments. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been going on for a while. It's about a year ago, in fact, that the original rezoning discussion and vote occurred. And but I do want to agree with Member Jackson. I hear the second voice clearly. It is, I think, an area that requires redevelopment at some point. Yesterday, each council member received an update on another change on the project from Brent Webb. That's the addition of solar energy panels to the project, which is a welcome consideration. I'd like to thank Mr. Webb for that update because I hope that it can establish a precedent for what can happen with development in Edina. The significant changes that we're considering tonight are the exclusion of the market rate apartments, which provided the best possibility of affordable or obtainable housing on the site, and the inclusion of a 6 to 7 story parking ramp. Parking facility provides parking for the project to replace the contained parking on France, as well as some of the underground parking. I was a bit in the presentation, the original presentation on the parking ramp. I was just a bit confused because the ramp was presented as removable, and I got confused about that because it seemed to be that the attraction of building the ramp was the potential of removing it. But I find that necessary to the project itself, and in the TIF request, it's presented as a public benefit. So we're going to live with that ramp. The evaluation by Mick Johnson in considering the Southdale design guidelines is far less favorable than of the original proposal. And it recognizes the economic challenges of balancing the human experience with a project of this density. The financial challenges, finding the balance, is really kind of the reason for the changes. That's why we're here with the second proposal tonight. It's very difficult in today's world to put together large projects, find the funding, and proceed in a way that anticipates success. And so this is just a reflection of that. A year ago, my objections to the project were based on 4 factors. Number 1, the deleterious impact on the adjacent Carnelia neighborhood, given the significant increased traffic, which, by the way, I think would be less under this second proposal. And also by the generation of traffic by the 2 other buildings directly in the market area that are also now being leased and delivered. And its physical impact on the Carnelia neighborhood is substantial. We've heard from many of those folks, both a year ago and today, about that. The Maxfield housing analysis indicates oversupply of these high-end market rate units, And when it was done, although that does go back a bit now, it doesn't recommend more at this time. Instead, that study points to the missing middle and more affordable housing units. The third purpose or objection on my part at that time was that the CoStar report, which is a commercial real estate research entity, done at that time projected a vacancy rate of 26% as the Bauer and Millennium began to lease their 400 units in the same approximate price range. That projection was made prior to the Perkins site approval of about 200 units. Then combined with 267 here, seems to me that the projected vacancy rate would be significantly higher. Now, one might ask, why is that an issue? Because it's the developer's issue. There's public funding involved in that, and I know that we're on a pay-go basis, but the success of the project is very important when we consider public funding for any of these projects. My recommendation at that time was to delay rezoning consideration, as coming out of the pandemic, it'd take 1 to 2 years to determine what the economy would actually support. Today, while not out of the pandemic, supply chain issues mentioned earlier, cost of materials, worker shortages, and higher inflation continue to cloud the picture of what the near future will provide and what actual demand will be for both office space and high-end rentals. There's a lot of attractions to this project. The design, I believe, is a solid one. The area needs redevelopment. There's many things to consider in it, but all of the factors that I've just mentioned combined to convince me that the Planning Commission's vote to deny is the correct one. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just add a couple of comments. One, we have to do something with traffic. And what I'm getting at there is it seems that we're inconsistent on how we evaluate traffic. And I know it's a challenge where we're looking at structures that aren't existing, and we're projecting traffic with current data, and then we try to project against increased density in the area. But I think that's one of the areas that we have to figure out a better way to be more confident in how we're impacting traffic. I do agree with Member Anderson that this change, I think it should reduce traffic, but I'm not sure. And so I would like for us to be able to be more sure of the impact there from a traffic perspective. And so that's one comment I'll make. With every development that comes before us, and it actually doesn't matter where it is, whether it's in Southdale, whether it's the Perkins site, there's 4 things that people talk about. One of those is traffic. One is density, and height is the third one. And then 4th is green space. So the destruction of green space. And so what that tells me is if those are the 4 factors that we hear, no matter where we are in the city, I think we have to try to do a better job at how we articulate how we are impacting those 4 things as we make decisions, because we will inevitably decide to move forward, but those 4 things will still be issues in the community. And so we have to be able to talk about how we're going to be able to address those things. And so the other comment that I wanted to make is around affordable housing. That actually is the 5th thing when we're talking about especially large developments, affordable housing. And so with that one, I think that we have to think outside of the box on how we're going to provide affordable housing. Looking at this proposal, when I was leading the Race and Equity Task Force, we talked about not liking the idea that developers could do the buy-in. This idea that part of the thought was there are developers who don't want the market impact of providing affordable housing, so they do the buy-in. And in all honesty, I thought that was true in 2018. But if you wait long enough, one thing we know is that things will change. But one of the things that will change is we get smarter. We understand more. We run for city council, and now we're responsible for making the decisions, and we get to talk to the developer more, hypothetically speaking. And so in this particular case, I actually am leaning more towards having developers do the buy-in. Because if it gives us more control over where we do affordable housing, that is incredibly valuable, I think, to the city. One of the comments that I had from one of the Cornelia neighborhood residents, she said that she's for affordable housing, but she believes it should be equitable. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said affordable housing should be equitable across the city. So the entire city, if we believe that that's a value we want, the entire city should participate in how we're able to provide affordable housing. So I mention that because doing the buy-in, I believe that Mortenson will help come up with an idea to achieve that. However, when you read the resolution, line item, I think is 2G, just says the project would meet the city's affordable housing policy. And by doing the buy-in, they actually meet that. But I would like to amend this to require the ability to sketch out what we think the plan will be. And that needs to be in conjunction with Manager Hawkins. But I think we should do that and be able to see that plan because I think it could be transformative in how we provide affordable housing, but we're not seeing any of that today. And so that's one thing that I would ask from a condition, if we're able to see the sketch out of a plan of how we provide affordable housing beyond just saying the buyout. And I did not, just as Member Jackson, we didn't vote on this last year, but she and I both watched the city council meetings, and with this particular development, it's a huge development. But one of the things that I have learned is that for the majority of the things that come before us from a development perspective, it's never 50-50, but you typically get feedback on both sides. And what I try to do is to weigh what I think some of the value is in the proposal. I do think having the area developed is important. We hear that in the feedback. That's one of the voices. I talked about traffic. I think this proposal does address some of the traffic, but as a city, that's something we need to, Manager Neal, look at what we can do there to just be more sure of how we're impacting traffic. But But all of that being said, I think this affordable housing piece, while we have feedback with residents saying we should not support this because affordable housing is not in the plan and we're doing the buyout, I do think that there's a lot of value in what I think we're able to do here with Mortenson. And I mentioned that a little bit in the last city council meeting. And so I would be in support of this project for those reasons.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Pierce. Member Sutton.
Let me say a couple of things at the outset. The first is my colleagues. My God, what a great group of people. The compelling arguments on both sides of this issue are extraordinary, and I'm feeling very fortunate to be up here with all of you. So thank you for your good thoughts on this. I also wanted to thank Mr. Carlson and Mr. Webb and their development team. You know, in my 6, 7, however many years I've been in the council, I have had a lot of opportunities to work with Mr. Carlson, and I have found him to be extraordinarily earnest and doing good work for our community, and so I appreciate his efforts here. I was here last year when we voted on this, and I supported this project. And I supported it because it was, in my view, a culmination of our efforts over 5 years on the Southdale District Plan and the Design Experience Guidelines that followed it. And the Design Experience Guidelines, I think, are very important because they're not just a suggestion, they're really the district plan references them as an implementation tool, as a way to judge whether we're meeting the intent of the design experience of the plan. And they're really very detailed. It's an incredible document that was put together by a lot of people in the community who worked very hard on trying to recognize that our greater Southdale area was going to change and how could we help it change in a way that was going to be productive for all of us. And it really focused on changing this experience from these quarter-mile long blocks that required you to get in your car and go from point to point, even if you were going just next door, to a place that would be more pedestrian scale, more inviting to participation by pedestrians. And I think part of what I found very attractive about the plan last year was it was the first project really to cut one of these super blocks into 4 pieces. And that is still true, even under this plan. It already has been, as I understand it, subdivided, and the streets, the easements have been granted as public realm. So I think that's a very important thing. I was in favor of it last year, despite the fact that I thought one of the corners, the bank corner, did not comply with the Southdale, the Design Experience Guidelines. It didn't set back sufficiently from France. It was a 1-story building that had a surface parking lot next to it. I also note that, as Mr. Teague confirmed a few minutes ago, it didn't precisely comply with all of the Design Experience Guidelines. The 70th Street's room typology wasn't quite what is called for in the Design Experience Guidelines. But I thought it got most of the way there. And so I was supportive of it. And so when we come to this plan, I think that the northern half, or 2/3, everything south, everything north of what will be 71st Street, is actually good and improved. I like the new public space that's alongside the northeast building instead of at the south side of the the northwest building instead of at the south side of the northeast building. And I think that streetscape is better and more inviting. But at the same time, the changes on the southeast corner where we have lost the workforce housing and market rate apartment building and replaced it with a ramp are distressing. And I agree actually with Councilmember Pierce about the affordable housing. I actually have become convinced over the years that the buy-in is a more efficient and more effective tool for us. And I would point to the 70th and Amundsen project and the 4040 70th Street project as places where we have been able to really leverage the money that we get from these projects into creating real affordable housing at a scale that makes a difference. So I'm not that alarmed by the conversion of the affordable housing from being in the project to being a buy-in to our fund that can create affordable housing elsewhere. And as Councilmember Pierce noted, throughout the community. But I find it quite distressing that we have a standalone parking ramp. And I admire Mr. Webb and Mr. Carlson's efforts to persuade us that it can be disassembled and therefore it doesn't have to be a flat plate convertible building. And that may be true, but it seems to me it flies directly in the face of one of the most important concepts in the design experience guidelines, which is not to create these whole blocks of space that are dead space for pedestrians, that just have no parking, have nothing but parking. It is a conversion of what we are trying to get rid of, which is development surrounded by seas of parking, into just stacked parking. And I remember when I was on the Planning Commission years ago, we recommended against a parking ramp in the development that now has the Container Store right next to Centennial Lakes. And to this day, I think that's a terrible idea that we put a parking ramp, no matter how well clad, right on Centennial Lakes, and I think it was a disaster. And I don't want to make that mistake again. And I think absent some kind of liner, even though I take into, I think Councilmember Jackson's points are well taken about having the parking out of the existing buildings. I think a standalone parking ramp without any liner housing that is not going to be district parking, the developer, you know, I think commendably has told us that this is what they think is necessary to support the use on the office corner. And I'm going to trust him on that. I tend to feel like the person flying the plane wants to make sure that it's working properly. So I can't support this, and I'm disappointed to say so, and I hope for better in the future. And it is especially difficult for me to tell Mr. Webb and Mr. Carlson that I can't support it because I'm big admirers, and I think they're moving in the right direction, but I won't be able to support this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Member Staunton. So for me, on the analysis on this, I hearken back to the project that we originally approved. And the question for me was, did the changes the developer needed to make due to the increased construction costs and financial challenges cause me to change my mind about the value of the project to our city? And the short answer is no, it didn't cause me to change my mind. In fact, I think the pandemic actually provided a silver lining that I never saw coming. And I think this project, as Member Jackson points out, is better now than it was before. And in terms of people that are concerned about height and density, and also that pedestrian experience, the changes from 20 to 21 are we got an improved pedestrian experience on Ewing. We eliminated parking access points on Ewing. The plaza is larger, not shaded, and more interactive with the entire site. The flipped office design to open Ewing Avenue to a viewing corridor was a real positive thing, I think, and consistent with the design experience guidelines, which I would, in my opinion, those are exactly how they're characterized, our guidelines. To expect somebody to meet all of those things as requirements, I think is aspirational, but not required in my mind. The improved flexibility with retail along Ewing and the future retail along Drew and 71st were appealing to me. And then, of course, the density. We reduced the density by 31%, or the applicant did, 390 units down to 270 units. And the traffic was reduced by 39%, which Director Teague mentioned. And not going to have a grocery store there, which would have been compounding the problems. The office height was reduced from 10 stories to 7 stories. Multifamily was reduced by 15 feet in height. I have actually come, I was initially really disappointed that we had to lose that workforce housing. But I've been to enough sessions now. The most recent one was a Regional Council of Mayors session last week on the future of office space. And because we know that the world is changing and people are finding out, offices and businesses are finding out that people can be as effective at home as they are at work, but still want them at work sometime. We don't know yet what the future of parking is going to be. So what I was worried about in this analysis was getting trapped, as Member Jackson said, with 560 spaces in the building that you could never do anything with. So what we got a chance now is to have a standalone parking garage, properly skinned to make it look like public art, that can be dismantled, and I don't for a minute doubt that that can be dismantled, that is a freestanding element in this district that could eventually end up being district parking buried in the center, just like Nolan Mains has parking buried in the center of the project, and really not even noticeable if the other parts of that area redevelop, which it probably will over time. But the beauty of the whole thing is that because it's a standalone garage, structured parking facility, it might be torn down someday. You can't do that with the office building where the parking is all underneath. And I just think that this was, for me, one of the, almost an epiphany sort of moment, especially after listening to the panel I listened to last week talk about the future use of office space. With regard to the comments by Mick Johnson, I find Mick Johnson to be doing the job that he's supposed to do. And he's supposed to tell us what his view of the world is on your experience guidelines. I don't agree with him all the time. I don't agree with him this time. I think that the efforts that the developer has made to comply with our sustainability plan feel like they're right on the mark with our 2022 sustainability policies is really admirable. And then this idea of these solar panels being added to the garage, I think is a terrific addition. For me, we got a chance, and I said this when we approved it over a year ago, this is going to be setting the standard for the entire Southdale District for the future. And contrary to what the Planning Commission determined, I'm personally not prepared to throw over a very, very, very good project in the quest for the perfect. It just feels to me like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And so for the prospect of us being able to add $250 million worth of market value with a very, very, very good project to our community and increase that tax base and diminish the burden on single-family homeowners as a result of it, to me, it tells me that I'm going to favor the passage of this thing. To the issue that Member Pierce raised, which is, can we sketch out the use of the affordable housing project before or as a condition of approval? That's something worth talking about. I think it might be really difficult. I was thinking about the project that Member Staunton mentioned over in 77th, which is the Aon project. We parked that money, and in this case, remember now, this would be the first project where we're going to get $125,000 per unit on a buy-in basis. It's extraordinary, really. $3+ million that's going to get banked up the minute the building permit fee is issued, as I recall. We then get the chance, I think, to sit back and say, who's going to come to us with some ideas on how to use this money? I think it would be really tough to figure out exactly how you sketch out the use of it so far in advance and maybe limit yourself on what the possibilities might be, but I just want to understand more what you're thinking about, and maybe it's possible, and if it is, great. If it's not, I want to make sure that you'd be comfortable with this idea that we're going to park this money and wait for an affordable housing building developer to come along where we can do what we want to do, where we want to do it, and how we want to do it.
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I make maybe two comments. Where I'm going is the way the resolution reads now, the developer would meet the standard simply by writing the check. And what I'm saying is that shouldn't be enough for us. We actually want, I think we should have the developer a little bit more skin in the game in terms of helping ensure that we're able to actually do affordable housing, provide the development. And I know that Mortenson actually does this in other areas in Minneapolis. If it was a different developer, I might feel differently about that. But I'm not, what I'm asking is maybe trying to figure out a way that we can continue to work with the developer to ensure that we have a plan for how we're going to provide affordable housing beyond just writing the check.
Here's one idea is, would you be comfortable with the notion that between preliminary now and final, that we give staff the direction to work with the developer to try to figure out that language, so when it comes for final, we've accomplished what you want to accomplish?
Yeah, and I would go even a step further than that. I'm willing and happy to work with staff to come up with that plan, because I do believe this could be something that's pretty special.
Your Honor. Yes, sir. I can tell you we'd be happy to do that with Councilmember Pierce. I think the concern I want to add is a concern that we encountered as staff in our discussion with the Sunny Slope neighborhood when we imposed a condition into the preliminary approval that was a condition on the city instead of a condition on the developer. I think it works if you can put all the kind of conditions on staff that you want. You don't need to put that into the resolution. And we're happy to work with you and use that time frame between preliminary and final to come up with at least an idea about how we could move some kind of project forward with this money.
Yeah, that was the way I interpreted it, is that the condition would be on the developer to work with staff. And maybe I didn't express that very well, but I mean, I would expect that the developer would come forward to work with staff to come up with some ideas about how to satisfy that condition. I mean, we just expect them to do that, but the condition would be imposed as a condition of final.
We don't typically work with the developer about how that money is going to be spent in the community. Sometimes they have ideas, but typically Stephanie Hawkinson and some members of the city staff team will have some ideas that they've been working on, and that this is the funding vehicle for those.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to maneuver.
Can I jump in?
Remember something?
I think our policy talks about this buy-in as something that we can permit.
Right.
It isn't as of right for the applicant. And so what you could do is add a condition that would kind of make that determination at the final. But that's, if there was some work to be done between now and the final on alternatives to the buy-in, and then make a decision about whether those alternatives. That's just my 2 cents worth as I watch this discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Member Pierce. You say that you know things about Mortenson's practices and everything. Are you thinking that they have, as a builder, that they have access to resources that Stephanie Hawkinson might not have, or expertise in how to leverage that money? Is that where this is coming from?
So I do know that Mortenson has done other affordable housing projects. Predominantly in the North Minneapolis area. And so I don't believe that they're a developer who's saying, hey, get me out of affordable housing, let me write the check. That's not them. And so I mean, we were close to close to something when we were saying that staff would work with the developer or vice versa to sketch out a plan for how we can achieve affordable housing. I think that is fine with me, and I think what that would end up meaning is, and I think this is right, so Manager Hawkins owns that piece. The developer doesn't. She owns figuring out how we can leverage these dollars to get affordable housing done. But then I believe Mortensen could work with her to help figure out, is there another developer? And we've done this before with other developers to say, the other example I'll use, the old public works site, right? I believe Franshu isn't well versed on how to do community engagement development. So they needed to seek out another partner to do the other half of that lot. And so that's kind of the idea here, because I think I frankly think it could set a precedent that when developers come into Edina, there's going to be a requirement that we are going to try to leverage developers to extend benefit to the community. And I think that's movement in a direction that I think is good for the community. And this is just one way I think we could start to do that with affordable housing.
Let me step aside just quickly from that and come back to it. But Director Teague, on the resolution 2021-103 on the conditions, where's the condition that deals with the affordable housing buy-in at $125,000 per unit per obligated unit?
So that's per the policy number. The condition is number 10 in the resolution. And if I might offer it, as you mentioned, this is preliminary. They still need to come back for final, where we would make the final determination. The condition could read, the project must conform to the city's affordable housing policy, staff to work with the developer to develop a plan, final determination to be made by the city council at final approval.
Does that work for you, Member Pierce? Okay. And then I'm going to add, we could do this two ways, Member Jackson. Under 15, on the conditions, it says provision of green roofs as shown on the building renderings. We could add plus solar panels added to the garage, or to the structured parking, or you could have a separate.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Either way, yeah.
And then I would add, pursuant to your request, number 21 would be compliance with the green building policy of the city. 22 would be contribution of public art valued at $100,000 to the project. And I think that's it. That would take us to where we have discussed being with respect to conditions. Does that capture what you were thinking of,
It
Member
does.
Jackson?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Member Pierce, with number 10 being modified by Director Teague, are you satisfied too?
Yep. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. So with those conditions added, yes, gentlemen.
Ted Carlson, 5516 Knoll Drive. Ron with Mortensen. We want to make sure we're really clear on the affordable piece. So, you know, we're here last fall and worked through this, and we had some questions. I think our intent is absolutely to comply with the policy, but I want to make sure that it's not understood that we are to develop affordable housing ourselves elsewhere in the city.
Member Pierce?
Yep. No, thank you for that clarification. Actually, would you restate?
It would be, the project must conform to the city's affordable housing policy, staff to work with the developer to develop a plan, final determination to be made by City Council at final approval.
So just in that, the intent is not to say that Mortenson would provide affordable housing in Edina. The idea is just to have the plan sketched out. And so like I could see that in the example I tried to give earlier. One option could be that Mortenson could recommend other developers that you have a history with that have done affordable housing. But as I stated, Manager Hawkins owns the plan. What I'm trying to do is say it's not just 100% on the city to do this. We need to collectively figure out how we can meet that standard. And I personally think maybe we need to think through the best way to do it, but to move us towards a developer has to do more than just write the check and walk away. And I know that's not what you're suggesting you're doing, but that's what I'm trying to sketch out.
So it may be an example of the buy-in funds of X could be used for A, B, and C within our city in accordance with Stephanie Hawkinson and staff support.
Can you say that one more time and speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. It may be something where we work with Stephanie Hawkinson and staff to say the buy-in dollars are X amount, $3.4 million, and that buy-in dollars would provide A, B, and C within our city with this certain developer or purchase this site or these single-family homes or whatever it may be in conjunction with staff.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it. Yep.
Is that something you're comfortable with?
Yes.
Yeah, we just wanted clarification.
Okay.
That should be consistent with the language you crafted too, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With the changes to conditions 10, 15, and the addition of conditions 21 and 22, is there a motion to adopt resolution 2021-103 approving a zoning ordinance amendment and revised overall development plan for 7001 and 7025 France Avenue?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any just further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the resolution as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. All right, and then the other matter is Director Teague approving the zoning ordinance amendment embodied in 2021-13. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, is there a motion to that effect? Motion to adopt ordinance 2021-13 approving the zoning ordinance amendment?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. All right. That concludes that matter on a preliminary basis. Thank you, everybody. Final thing this evening before we get into some internal matters is we've got a sketch plan review for 6016 Vernon Avenue. It's created a lot of buzz online and with correspondence with the council. And I think Director Teague, if you want to introduce the topic, I think we've got some folks here that want to make a presentation to us and get some potential or get feedback from us on their idea to see if the idea has merit or not and whether they should think about going forward or not going forward with this idea of a restaurant at the old auto repair site, Kevin Key site.
Correct. I will just give just a brief kind of overview introduction of the project, and then the applicants will take you through the detail. So the proposal is to remodel the Keys Auto down on Vernon Avenue, remodel and expand to a 68-seat restaurant with a 1,000-square-foot office on a second level. Currently, the property is zoned PCD4, which only allows automobile-type uses, so a rezoning would be required. So with this request, also a comprehensive plan amendment would be required. Currently, it's guided for medium density residential, which allows between 5 to 12 units per acre on the site. So for a commercial use to continue, we need to rectify that comprehensive plan discrepancy that we have. There's also a number of variances that are required for the addition. On Eden Prairie Road, a setback from 35 to 13 feet. Also from 35 feet to 1 foot for the patio where there's an outdoor dining area. Also the side setback on the west side, variance would be required from 25 feet to 5 feet. That's the site right adjacent to the multifamily residential to the west. Also a parking stall variance. Staff has a number of concerns over those variances, particularly when it comes to that area is used for screening typically, especially with a restaurant like this in a residential zone. So there's not as much room to provide that buffer to adjacent properties. So some concern with that. The Planning Commission did review the project. They liked the concept, but did have some concerns with some of those, some of the impacts as well. And as you've mentioned, you've received lots of feedback from the public. So with that, I'll introduce Marty Collins and Christian Dean, the architect, and they're going to take you through the details of the project.
Okay. Before we get there, Director Teague, would you stand for a couple questions?
Oh, sure.
I was wondering, the history. You know, how did we end up with an auto repair shop in what looks like a multi-family and single-family neighborhood? Years ago, was it a grandfathered in situation that was there long before those houses and apartment buildings and condos were there?
I believe so. I tried to do a little research on it, and we really don't have much. So,
okay.
And it's been guided in our comprehensive plan for that medium density for 20 plus years. So we've always had this little inconsistency with our comp plan and actually what it's zoned.
All right. Any other questions for Director Teague before we start? Member Staunton?
Just on that point, it's guided for medium density residential, so we probably should change the zoning in any event. But what would be eligible zoning districts to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, so, excuse me, that would be the PRD 1 or 2 zones, kind of similar to the project that we reviewed up on France, 4630 France, where they were looking at a duplex.
Sure.
Could be detached or attached under that PRD zoning.
And what did you say was the amount of units that could fit on this site?
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan is the range is 5 to 12 units per acre. Because this site is so small, to conform to the comprehensive plan, the maximum number of units would be 4 on the site.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead, Director Teague.
Good evening. I'm Christian Dean, the architect for the client and property owners. Thank you, Director Teague, for setting up the project. I don't know that I could. Good evening. I'm Christian Dean, the architect for the property owners and the developers of the property. Thank you, Director Teague.
Mr. Dean, would you give your business address, please? Yes,
Christian Dean Architecture, 2909 Bryan Avenue South in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
All right, thank you.
The project is seeking the variances and the rezoning that Director Teague summarized. We, since our last meeting with the Planning Commission and the sketch plan review, we've made some minor adjustments or proposed some adjustments to the plan, namely moving the patio that we had located to the north of the building, which is towards the residential neighborhood. We've since planned the outdoor patio to the south of the building on Vernon. just hearing the feedback of noise and screening of that use. We also added we found a way to add 2 more parking spaces, so now we're up to 28. The requirement, obviously these are very preliminary plans, and sort of the occupant load and the seating count is in flux to some degree, but we are 5 parking spaces short. We've been doing some thinking about, we have a suggestion, I know this is outside of our wheelhouse, but some of the planning commission members, were intrigued by the idea of Vernon having some parallel street parking to calm traffic. Just in our limited research, we've been looking at, roadway reduction trends throughout the federal government. We have an example from some papers from the federal government about reducing a 44-foot wide roadway to 2 lanes of parking, parking on either side in a bike lane. That all can certainly fit within a 44-foot wide roadway. At least there's studies of that. I know this is something that's not under our control, but it's obviously something that was a hot topic during our sketch plan review. I think you've seen the plans here. Obviously the addition is to make the operations of the restaurant viable. Obviously the building is quite small. It's approximately 1,200 square feet. And we are really just making use of the parking that Kevin Keys has been using for however many years he's been there. We're not changing curb cuts. We would maintain the screening of the parking that he has. He has obviously some cypress trees that have been doing a good job screening the parking from Vernon. So this was the previous plan we are showing here, was a proposed patio to the north. We've since then located it in this area where it's a bit to the south of the building. Parking is a little bit different. We've added 2 more spaces along the south here. For some reason, our new plan isn't on this PowerPoint, but I think generally we can tell you that this is where we're looking to do the patio, and trash would be located over here. Yeah, with that, that's some changes that we've made since the sketch plan review. Essentially moving the patio and adding a few more off-street parking spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
Hello, my name is Marty Collins. I've been running restaurants now for 25 years.
Your business address, Mr. Collins?
I got a bunch of them. I'll give you 3801 Grand Way, St. Louis Park.
Okay, thank you.
St. Louis Park. McCoy's, and we got Nolo's downtown. I got a bunch in Kansas City as well. Long story short, I live about 6 houses behind this location. I grew up in Edina. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm excited to have a place on the west side because the east side is just covered in all kinds of good, fun stuff, and us on the west side keep suffering because we don't have a place to hang out. We don't have a place to go to coffee. We don't have a place to hang out and do lunch. Everything west of the hilltop seems to be quite dead over there, and I'd like to change that. And we're proposing a fun place for the community to hang out, have coffee in the morning, come in for a quick lunch, kids going to school, can stop in, get a smoothie, whatnot. We'd like to have full alcohol be part of this deal. Brunches, lunches, and celebrations to be had. Other than that, it's a restaurant. I think you guys know what that looks like. We have had some people be telling us that it's a kind of a problem. They're worried about the noise. They're worried about the parking, especially to the north. We hear that, we understand that, and we hope that you guys can help us out with some solutions. But we think that Vernon is a wonderful option for that, as well as Eden Prairie Road. But at the end of the day, we're here to listen to what you suggest to solve these parking solutions. And we do understand that we're going to be busy, hopefully, because there's nothing on the west side currently. So we hope to be busy, and we obviously don't want to be a problem to the neighborhood, but we want to be an addition for people to have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Have you had any conversations, or Mr. Dean, with the county, since Vernon's a county road?
No.
Okay. All right. Member Pierce, you want to start out on your observations and questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I live in Highlands, and that's my walking path when I walking to Parkwood Knolls. We kind of walk through there, and I was always kind of surprised too that there was an auto zone store or auto repair shop right in that triangle, and I just wondered, why is that there? And so it has always struck me as odd. But this, I think, I could be wrong, but this is the first proposed kind of sketch plan review that I've seen where all of the feedback is not positive. And there were a couple that were neutral, and those said, we think it's a good idea to have a restaurant, but we're opposed to this one. And so I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's a great plan. And so to bring it home, you have to have both of those things be true. So if I was saying to you today, this is a bad idea, you shouldn't do it, you'd have quite a bit of an uphill battle. But there have been comments that have said, yeah, it's a good idea to have a meeting place, but this particular plan is not a great plan. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting in your deck, you showcase Colita. One of the things the neighbors have talked about is traffic, and you started, the architect started with that as well. My wife and I like Colita. We hardly ever go there. We always do takeout because you can't park, and you end up parking on the street or trying to find some place to park across the street. It's even difficult to get in if you're taking to do takeout. There's like 3 or 4 lanes where you can park. It's probably my issue. I drive a big vehicle, so to get in there and back in, it's kind of a pain. And so I thought it was interesting you would use that as your example of what you're envisioning on that site, because it actually illustrates some of the challenges that the neighbors have talked about. Overflow parking, being on the street, is definitely what happens in the restaurant that you chose to highlight. And so I would just really go back to, it's a good idea but not a great plan. And what I would ask you to do is I would meet with the neighbors, and I know you're going to say you've done that, but the sense that I get is that many times the developer takes the idea and they meet with the neighbors to kind of almost convince the neighbors that this is a good thing. We can work through whatever your issues are. And that's one approach. But I think for this to get to a point where it's a good idea with a great plan, I think you almost need to go meet with the neighbors to say, hey, you live 6 houses, you live behind the current site. For you to say, hey, it would be great if we had a meeting place. What would work for the community? What are some ideas that would make this work in the confines of the lot that we have today? I think that would be my suggestion, to start kind of to reset that, to come up with a plan that the neighborhood could get excited about. And then my hope would be that if you have that conversation, we would start to see more feedback from the neighborhood saying, yeah, we think this is a great plan. And yeah, we'd love to to see this brought to our community. But right now, I'm not quite seeing that. So like I said, I think it's a good idea, but we need to do a little bit more on the planning. And I'd say that there's two things there's two things I would focus on. One would be the size, and it seems too big for that space to me. I'm not a developer, but when I look at it and I envision that space, it seems too big. Parking, I think that is definitely going to be a challenge in that area. If being a resident first, if I lived on that street, it would irritate me if there was parking, overflow parking in front of my house. That would irritate me. And so I think figuring out a way to address that really is paramount. There's also a lot of feedback about your desire to have full alcohol. There are some delis in Edina where there is no alcohol. That's kind of Danish coffee, that kind of thing. I think that type of a model would probably be more embraced by the community. And so again, I think I would almost go back to the drawing board and ask the neighbors to help come up with solutions that they believe would make a draw for their neighborhood and would be something that more people would be excited about seeing come to that block. And then the last thing I would say is if Keys is now closed, all of these decisions have a flip side. So I mean, we could end up with a triangle that is not a nice looking site for a long time. And I think those are also things that we have to think about in a community. Is that okay? But one of my council members have always said we should be more open to saying, well, if not this idea, this developer, let's give it a little time because if we wait long enough, we know something will change. So those are the comments that I have. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Member Pierce. Member Staunton?
I have a lot of the same kind of comments that Councilmember Pierce said. I guess I'd say them in a little different way. Since the property is guided for medium density residential, we'd have to change the comprehensive plan in the direction that it's going. And, the idea that you brought forward kind of reminds us of Town Hall Station, which I think is a huge success. But the difference, of course, is that Town Hall Station is part of a commercial node that's been there for some time. And so putting that together didn't change the character of the area. Now, granted, you have a auto repair place there now, but it never has been guided under our comprehensive plan. And so I think to make that kind of change going forward, you would need really at least a 50-50 support from the neighborhood, and we haven't heard of anything near a 50-50 support just in the informal input that we've gotten. At the same time, I'd say to the neighbors that I think, they have to be comfortable that it could be 4 housing units as well, which Mr. Teague informs us it could withstand if it wasn't this. So you have to kind of be careful what you wish for. So I think like Councilmember Pierce said, and like many members of the Planning Commission said, there's a good idea here. I think it just needs some more support and maybe some revision to make it fit what the site is like.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've gotten a lot of good advice here so far. and I tend to concur with my colleagues on some of the feedback that you've gotten from them. To be honest, your plan is changing as we speak. So it looked to me like you're shifting the patio, and I'm a little unclear what that means to the setback variance that you've been seeking. So I'm just going to give you some thoughts based on what you've submitted, not so much on what we're talking about as potential. So the idea of a neighborhood gathering place does have a certain appeal, no question. When I think of a neighborhood gathering place that's close to a residential area, I think in terms of like a coffee shop or with a bakery and deli, something easy and smaller that isn't really open evenings, does not have liquor. I think you still have the gathering place concept and probably a demand for the product, but people with shorter duration and that type of idea is kind of what comes to my mind. The size of this on that site is, I think it's too much, that's all. To have the kind of full service environment which you envision, it just will simply attract more traffic than you have parking for. And so I think that the immediate neighbors express their concern along those lines. They don't want that parking coming into the neighborhood. And you live actually fairly close there, I think. As a practical matter, you wouldn't necessarily want it if you weren't in your position. I don't think we want a red cow there, or the effect of a red cow. I think that would be detrimental to the neighborhood. So the idea to me of a comp plan amendment is it's a little distant. I think that'd be a little bit of a harder sell, only because on a personal basis, I think to overstep the medium density housing potential there that should be considered as well. That's not what you're presenting. I understand that, but you heard Councilmember Staunton earlier discuss, well, can't that be rezoned now with an eye to the future of the current use being grandfathered in and then some zoning change which could anticipate housing there? Because we talk a lot about the missing middle, but it continues to be missing. And so that it looks to me, just with an eye for that 3, possibly 4 units of townhouse units can fit in there if turned properly, still screened with access. I think that could be workable too. But if you decide to come back, I think that excuse me, if you could pull it down. I know that's not what you want to hear. I get it, but something that remember Pierce gave you really good advice. Sit down with the community and see what you can work out with them that they might be able to embrace, and then to come back seems like that's a good idea. So, thank you.
Thank you. Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, you're really not gonna like what I have to say, and that is, I do not support a restaurant in this site. When we passed a comprehensive plan, we did so to have predictable decision-making in our city. And so people moved into this neighborhood because it's one of the quietest neighborhoods in Edina. And I think that's something that we move into a quiet neighborhood, it should stay that way. When we passed the comprehensive plan, we promised the people, and I wasn't on the city council at the time, but the promise was made, and it's one that I endorsed, that change would only happen in these change areas that we outlined. And we have 6 change areas: Grandview, Wooddale and Valley View, Cahill and 70th, 44th and France, 50th and France, and Southdale. And the promise was made that that's where the change would occur, and that we could predict how things would be based on the comprehensive plan for at least the next 10 years. And that's an important promise to me. I went back and looked at the housing task force goals, and one of the things that's mentioned in there is a value that the city has, and it's called accountability. We do what we are saying. We do what we say we are going to do, and we do not change the rules. Putting a restaurant here is changing the rules, and I don't approve of that. Also, in the housing task force, and we had a budget discussion tonight, one of the things that we're looking for in the next 2 years is to implement this housing budget, this housing task force. And goal number 1 is to promote lifestyle housing. I've always viewed this site as one of the few sites in the city of Edina where we can build some creative housing, missing middle housing. I am very sad to think that we would lose that opportunity for something that's very difficult to build in our city. So that's another reason I'm opposed to it. Anything that comes forward, I would like to see an environmental review. This is a former gas station, and who knows what's in the soil there. I went and walked around the gas pump. Risers are still there from where the pumps were. This hasn't been disturbed since the gas pumps were taken out. And I'd like to remind the Planning Commission that we have an environmental chapter. And there are 7 areas that we should look at in everything the city does: energy, water, solid waste, air quality, trees, natural habitat, and environmental contamination. To have that come before us or before the Planning Commission without a review of possible contamination on this site, I think is an oversight. And any plan that comes forward, I want to see some sort of environmental review and whether remediation is needed at this space, at this site. I also am very concerned about the loss of green space. We are looking to make this a more green city, not a less green city. So those are my thoughts. I do stand by the promise that we made to the community that we will abide by our comprehensive plan. And unless the neighborhood comes to us and says, we would like to see a comprehensive plan change, I think they should be able to depend on the promise that we made them. Thank you.
This property forever has been a total anomaly. I mean, it's just a complete outlier. And I kind of get your idea of having someplace to walk down to and go to and enjoy it. And I think when I first heard about it, long before anything was filed, I thought conceptually it seems like people might like that. But when you see a plan like the one you have, where if my count is right, you need 5 variances, and it's short parked. And I don't think there's any question that you'd probably be a popular spot. You're probably a real good restaurateur and serve really good food. And the first thing you know, the people are parking in the neighborhood, and they could care less about who lives up the street, you included. Mm-hmm. And so you got cars next on your street until 10 o'clock at night, and it just feels so much like 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. And if this thing is going to lose its outlier status, it should be moving back into the realm of normality, I think, and compliance with what else is going on over there. And if it's guided for medium density housing, then that's what it ought to, I think that's what it ought to be. Despite the fact that from a concept standpoint, when I just heard about it, I thought, oh, it's kind of an interesting idea. But I think the more I look at it and I look at your plan, I just think that its future is in housing and not in a restaurant. So those are my thoughts. So you'll have to decide what you want to do in the face of all of that. You have the right to apply, but I wouldn't encourage you to do so.
Can I say a few words?
Pardon me?
There was a Nextdoor app that came out that people started talking about it, and everyone in the community that I know, and people in our community, some person came out against it, and about 80% of the people were positive on it, and 20% were like not for it. So I would contend that the people closest, very much closest, are the loudest. And to your point, they're the ones we should listen to and gather around and say, hey, what can we do to make this more okay for you people? Maybe we're not open past 10. Maybe there's no alcohol. I know what you're saying, But if you look at that next door chat, more people are for this than against this in this neighborhood. And I've got more cheerleaders than negative people. So I would contend that the neighborhood actually really wants it. But the people within 150 feet are tending to be the loudest, and I agree with them, and I understand they're going to be the most affected. But I would say that more people are cheering for us than are against us. So I think it would be 100% okay if we put cars on Vernon and not on Eden Prairie Road. We've moved our patio to the south. I think we've addressed 98% of the problem. If we can do that, I think we're going to be just fine. And I will go forward with this proposal. And I'll talk to Hennepin County or whatever I can do to get parking on Vernon. And I will talk to these people and say, hey, how can we meet in the middle? Because I think this is a wonderful idea. And I think they're going to be bummed out when we put a duplex there. This is my personal opinion. So I think we have an opportunity to make this awesome.
I think you're right to worry about the people that are right next door in Eden Prairie Road.
100%. They made it very clear.
But there's nothing you can do about.
Can you not park on the city street? Can you not park on Eden Prairie Road? Is that against the law?
No, it's not against the law.
Well, then what's the problem?
Well, you come back and see if there is a problem.
Okay, I heard that. Chris, would you like to say anything? Okay, sorry guys.
All right, that concludes that portion of the agenda. All right, I take it no correspondence has come in, Manager Neal, or Kirk Ellison? Aviation noise update, anything there?
None from me.
Okay, me either. Mayor and council comments, start with Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. One is I do just want to acknowledge the concerns that everybody has about public safety. It is a real sense of violation when a crime occurs in your life. And I hear loud and clear the voices of people talking about that. And thank you, Chief Milburn, for your presentation, and I do extend the offer that my colleagues made, that if you need our help, we stand ready to help you in any way we can. We've had a really interesting set of what I would call quirky zoning issues come before, and I was thinking about this thing on 6016 Vernon, and I thought about the property that's across the street where there were the villas, and then they proposed some condominiums in a funny little lot. And I think that's 5833 Vernon. I counted 5 properties that have come before the city in the last couple of years that just had kind of quirky zoning. 4630 France, 6016 Vernon, 5049 Hankerson, 4400 Valley View Road, that's that funny little triangle spot we heard about earlier, and 5833 Vernon. And I'd kind of like to have some guidelines on how we can evaluate properties that come forward that have these kind of anomalous zoning. I feel like it's on the owner or the developer to come to us with ideas, and that's a good thing, but I also would like to have some decision-making parameters for when we have these anomalous properties. And whether this is separate or whether it's part of it, I do see France, Vernon, and Valley View Road as opportunities for building slightly denser housing, sort of making it more uniformly. And I think, I can't remember, Mr. Teague, the phrase you used, that this is guided for, the medium density residential. I think maybe that we have some opportunities there. But I would like to have some, outside of the heat of looking at a particular development, some guidelines for how to handle anomalous zoning. And then finally, I talked to someone today who said, hey, is the city of Edina going to try and get some of this money from the new federal infrastructure bill? And I hope that we do apply for some opportunities to get some of that federal funding. I think of the Morningside Flood Infrastructure Project, or a Stormwater Infrastructure Project, and whether there are others as well. But this is a great opportunity to, once in a lifetime, I think, opportunity for infrastructure spending. And I hope that the city of Edina does apply for that. It's kind of exciting to have that opportunity. So, and thank you, everybody, for your really good analysis, too. I think that's, Kevin Staunton said that, or Member Staunton said that, and sure. I just want to thank you all, too, for your professionalism and thoughtfulness. That's it.
We'll have to get an analysis on that federal bill. I don't think I've seen anything to date that indicates that there's a tranche for local government, that it's coming down the traditional way to the dots. Okay. And then on to the region. And at least what I've been told so far is that it's going to mean maybe another 100 million for the region, but it'll be used by the Met Council. Okay. You know. We do have some money coming our way from some funds that were generated at the federal government, and I don't know if you've seen that chart or not, Manager Neal.
I'm not sure what you mean.
It's called, the acronym is CRISA funding, CRSSA, I think. And they have we determined at the tab to give this, I think it was 20+ million to give it to state and local government. And then depending upon your population density, you're going to get a certain amount of money. So there will be some coming, but I can't remember what the amount is. But it might have been, yeah. Well, it'll be helpful, whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do want to just look back a little bit in the course of the evening and mention that it's what I was hearing very clearly here, and especially that Member Pierce was bringing forward was it's time to take a good look at our affordable housing policy, how we do it, what we implement, how we go forward. And it's hard to attach that to a given project or development or proposal, but it could be time, to really say, what are we trying to do here, and are we getting where we're trying to go with it? And maybe we are. Maybe what we have is perfect and go forward. But it has shifted over the course of time, and it could shift again if there's really going to be units that come out of this. And so I just think that's at some point we should have a discussion and review that a little bit. Second is, and I want to direct this to Chief Milburn. I had a phone call, I think it was 2 weeks ago, on a Saturday night. And I don't get them very often, so, and it was from a former colleague who was on a hunting trip in northern Minnesota, I believe. And his camera, I think it was a Ring camera, but I'm not certain, he lost contact with his cameras. And something had fallen or dropped, was his perception. He called the non-emergency number at your department, and he said that he had a squad car there in about 6 minutes, and that they were on the phone with him, searching the perimeter, taking a look around, and got the cameras repositioned. Well, he was calling me to say thank you for that. Well, I'm passing that on to you, because it was there. Here's a guy who lives here and is pretty straightforward guy, and he was so impressed by that, and with the respect and demeanor of the officers who responded, that he wanted to pick up the phone at 9:30 on a Saturday night and say, hey, there's something happened really right here. I want to pass it on to you, so thanks, good job.
Member Sutton.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the theme of the public safety conversation we've been having tonight. I appreciate the chief, your overview of what's happening. And I would just encourage you and staff to be, you know, let's get the information out there on what we know is happening and what the statistics are. I found it interesting, for instance, that you talked about there's an uptick in car theft, but it's not carjackings. It's not the in-person or the armed robbery or those kinds of things, which doesn't mean that can't happen, doesn't mean, but it's important to be clear about what's happening so we don't, you know, so the public has a good, accurate picture of what to be worried about and what to be concerned about and how to protect themselves. And then, of course, as I know you're going to do, just do everything you can to try and discourage and follow up and deter any of this kind of behavior, because it really is, I mean, I can only imagine what it feels like to have somebody out of the blue at night or coming in your back door. I mean, that's for anybody, I think that'd be a terrifying feeling and one that sticks with you long after the moment. So, and some of the emails we got from folks who've experienced that is quite compelling. So it's obviously the first duty we have as a city is to protect folks and keep them safe. And so we should be mindful of making that a priority. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Thanks, Member Sutton. Good thoughts. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of things on, I'll start with affordable housing. I do feel like I mentioned before, that we can move in that space. What we need is ownership, affordable housing. And so I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But that's what we need, and something that is sustainable. And there are lots of bits and pieces of things that I believe, if we can connect those dots and come up with a construct, the vision I have is we come up with this construct that can actually go build affordable housing, and developer comes in and we say, hey, we don't want more apartments, we want townhomes, or we want ownership. So you do the buy-in, and we have a developer lined up who could do that. We've talked about the with HRA, this trust concept, right? We've got the makings of being able to really do something special. What we're missing, in my opinion, actually is the developer who is skilled at how do you actually build an affordable townhome with the right square footage that blends in with our neighborhoods so that affordable housing can be equitable across the community. And I think we can solve that. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with Manager Hawkins on coming up with a construct that I think it could be pretty special for us to figure something out there. So that's what I'd say there. For public safety, I just want to just say it. I feel less safe. And so we talked about it feels like a violation. Well, it is a violation. No one came into my garage, but I can promise you, we talked about, okay, remember, you need to be safer. We're gonna leave the lights on outside when my daughter is coming home from work. But when those things happen in the community, I think everybody feels just a little bit more, you're a little bit more apprehensive. You're a little bit more nervous finishing a city council meeting at 10:50 and walking across the parking lot. And I say that because it's not a bad thing to say, I feel a little less safe than I did this time last week. And so I start with that because I also believe that there are officers that we have who really care about the community. And so if that were not the case, I would be really nervous beyond just that bit of it makes me feel unsafe, right? It would give me more pause. And so I wanted to just do a shout out to Officer Jepson. And this is a point about the polarization that we have in our community. I got an email, and I think Officer Jepson posted on Nextdoor. And I'm going to paraphrase. We've had these break-ins, lock your doors, close your garage. Even if you're out front in your front yard, close your garage. So she's just going through, these are the things that you should do to feel safe. And then someone said, well, the Edina Police isn't really going to do anything. Well, that's not realistic. And I hope people are listening. I went on a ride-along with Officer Jepson. She cares deeply about the community. Her comments were just to say, hey, we're the police, we'll take care of it, we'll do the investigations, but help us help you in being safe, follow these guidelines. And I thought it was smart to do that, but I do I'll encourage our community in two ways. Have a little bit more grace for people, right? In every chance that you get, try to have more grace. Don't assume negative intent. Try to assume positive intent. And the second thing I would say, if you want to learn more about how we police the area, go on a ride along. Email the chief. We'll line you up with somebody that you can ride along with, and you can kind of get a better feel for how we do what we do. So I would encourage people to do that. I started by saying, yep, after those events, I felt a little unsafe. But I want to finish with, I'm positive that we'll address the issue. I have every confidence in the world that we will. And if we ever, unfortunately, have to call the police for an event at my house, I might specifically ask for Officer Jepson. So thank you for all that you're doing, Chief, and I'm positive that we'll get this under control and we'll be better for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Pierce. Yeah, I think plenty of great comments on the public safety side. So I think we all harken back to that time when we were young, and we probably lived in towns where it was rare that you lock the door. And maybe I don't remember my folks leaving the keys in the car, but there's certainly plenty of folks that still do that. You should be able to live in a town where you can leave your garage door open while you're working in the yard. But these are some unusual times, so I think we just need to be careful, be more vigilant, be cooperative with the police. As Manager Neal and the Chief said, this takes both residents and the PD to be able to solve this problem. We got to work together on it, and I think Member Pierce said it really artfully in terms of what we need to be mindful of there. A couple things for me. Veterans Day last week, the 11th, Veterans Day programs over at the high school. The orchestra and the choir, the orchestra was dressed up in their tuxedos and playing beautifully. the chorus as well had a great speaker. It was a sister of one of the teachers. One of our teachers over at the high school went to the Air Force Academy, and her sister was a doctor, had gone to the University of Minnesota, almost a 30-year veteran of the Army as a physician, and she did a wonderful job in her speaking. And then Rotary had their district event, and a lot of people attended that as well. And they had a great speaker there as well about mental health, staff sergeant. On the 8th, which was, I think was that last week ago, Monday? The National Merit Scholar event. I got invited over to that. And incidentally, I went to the Edina Realty weekly sales meeting this morning with Stacy Stanley, our superintendent. And I asked her to go and speak to the realtors about education in Edina, and I think it was very, very beneficial for the realtors to get education firsthand instead of through social media about the quality of our school district. But on November 8th at night, I think 31 National Merit semifinalists and commended students. And I just thought maybe take a quick minute here to read their names. The National Merit semifinalists, and of course what they do is a great night because they don't bring their parents up there. They bring their favorite teacher. They have their favorite teacher stand up in the audience, and they talk about from whether it was, somewhere between kindergarten and 12th grade, they had a favorite teacher, and they talk about why that person was their favorite teacher. Really, really powerful. Utai Kui, Grace Everts, Jack Herzer, Madeline Howard, Karen Lee, Peter Manns, Jack McIntyre, Adam Savageau, Anant Velavalli, and William Walkley. I sat right in front of the Velavallis, and Anant I think he's off to Stanford. So those are the National Merit semifinalists, and the National Merit commended students were Micah Berge, Aiden Einhorn, Mark Gargetta, Dipipia Guthikonda, Myra Hahn, Macy Iyer. We know Surya Iyer, her father, who was one of the founding members of the Energy and Environment Commission. Atman Jahargadar, I'm going to come back to him in a minute. Ryan Colgreen, Eleanor Carthouse, Audrey Keeley, Rosemary Larson, William Lethan, Jack McDonald, Lauren McDonald, Colin McCann, Ian McCann, Henkelman, Thomas Ritten, Pavel Runman, Josephina Scozzari, Olivia Sodarski, Kia Shapiro, Margaret Wagner, and Henry Zhao. Atman Jahargadar and his older brother Om, who's at Stanford right now. Atman came up afterwards and wanted to talk a little bit about, I've known him since he was an 8th grader. And he and Om started a nonprofit. Their parents had taken them to India when I think Atman was an 8th grader and Om was about a 10th grader. They came back and decided that there were all kinds of kids in India with vision problems and they needed glasses, so they started a nonprofit to get glasses to kids in India. And he said they're going strong, and he's got all kinds of relationships with frame producers here in the United States, grinding lenses in India, and now they're moving on to Ghana. And here's a senior in high school. I wasn't doing that when I was a senior in high school, starting a nonprofit. And then he said he also started a website to educate people about COVID, and that's already in multiple languages. And that was COVID19edu.org, I think, is what he'd set up. So there's all these young people doing these interesting things, which is really fantastic, and great kids in our town. It's fun to be part of it. So that's it for me. Walk with the Mayor is on Saturday. We're going to Southdale. We'll be indoors for the first time this year. And then don't forget if you haven't had your cake in Edina, you can get it over at the Edina Ed Fund. You can go to the fundraiser at St. Patrick's on the Friday morning at 10 o'clock if anybody can get over there. Or you can make a donation online for the Ed Fund. So, Manager Neal, you've got some things you want to cover.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have some things to cover tonight. First of all, items A and B are standard reports that appear under my report from time to time. I don't generally plan to say much about them unless there's something to highlight, but happy to answer questions that you might have tonight or even after tonight. Item C is the Juneteenth holiday. There has been some cities and counties that have already declared and adopted Juneteenth as an official holiday or paid holiday, or a holiday at which city facilities are closed. Both Minneapolis and St. Paul have taken that action. Both Hennepin County and Ramsey County have taken that action. But beyond those four, there may be a couple suburban communities that have taken that action, but really not too many. When we did some calling around, most of them said, we're waiting for the state to take a statewide action. And so that's what we heard. We did not include Juneteenth as a holiday in the official calendar that you adopted earlier tonight. If you do wish to take an action on Juneteenth to establish it as a holiday, we can do that, and we would add that to our official calendar as well. Juneteenth is celebrated on June 19th, and that happens to be a Sunday this coming year. If it is an action that you wish to take, you can, of course, take that by simple motion tonight. You can ask for additional information about what it means from a logistics or cost standpoint as well. I do recommend that we add this holiday to our schedule, but we needed a council action to do that. So, item D on my list is an update on U.S. internet expansion in Edina. There's a strange mythology around U.S. internet and their expansion into Edina, and that is that somehow the city is holding them up or preventing them from expanding here. Nothing could be further from the truth. We welcome U.S. internet coming into the community. It's important from a system build-out perspective that we understand how it works. So they recently established a headquarters or a head end in St. Louis Park, and their development will come into Edina from St. Louis Park. So they showed Director Milner and I met with a couple of their corporate leaders on Friday. They showed us a map of how they intend to expand into Edina. By the end of 2022, the map showed that they would be in the Morningside, Sunny Slope Country Club, and even down into the Arden Park neighborhoods by the end of 22. By the end of 2023, they would be everywhere in Edina north of the crosstown. By the end of 24, they would be everywhere in Edina south of the crosstown and north of 494. So that is their build-out plan. They feel it's an aggressive plan. You will hear people excited about this plan, and then when they're in the middle of it, you will hear people angry about this plan because they don't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Believe me, they're gonna mess up people's yards. They're gonna break people's driveways. All of that is going to happen but they are bringing their product here, and we'll do our best we can to regulate them in terms of their use of the right-of-way. But in terms of how they price their services and the services that they offer, we do not regulate that. They are not a cable television provider, so they're not regulated by the Southwest Cable Commission. They are regulated by FCC, which is pretty light, actually, at this stage. So they are coming our direction. Something that's coming on your calendar soon enough is our special meeting that we do every December, where we consider special assessments and projects for the upcoming year. That meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 13th of December, starting at 6 o'clock in the council chambers. And we've already advertised a number of different projects and for neighborhoods to be here that night. So we'll have it'll be a very similar meeting, I'm sure, to what we've had in previous years. A meeting that went really quite well this week was last night, and that was the kickoff meeting of the Cahill study, Cahill neighborhood study, and it was exceptionally well. Councilmember Jackson was there as well. People were civil and friendly and helpful and insightful. it was a well-run meeting by our two planning commission members and by Mr. Teague and his team. It was just really well done. Those kind of meetings across the country are ending in fistfights and mean comments, and we didn't have any of that last night. So it was really well done. We have something coming toward you on your calendar that we haven't had in a while, and that is a need to have a public hearing on a multiple pet request. So for maybe just the mayor, you might be the only one left, maybe Councilmember Staunton.
I was looking at Member Staunton thinking he was in on the 4 or 5 dog
the 4 dog question. We have a city code that limits the number of pets that you can have into 2 or 3. I can't remember what the number is, but if you want to have more pets than that, you have to come to the city. You have to ask the city for permission, and our process requires us to have a public hearing on this issue. And I'm going to ask you tonight if we can have a council public hearing and an action that night, given that pets' lives are in the balance, right? So it's a timeline that's important because there are some pets involved in where they're going to be. So it is our plan to when we have that public hearing, to operate it from that and seek an action from the council that same night. Two things that you approved tonight, I just want to give you a reminder about. The council has communicated to staff a number of times in a number of ways that you think mental health and mental health care is important to you. It's something that really kind of came to the forefront during the pandemic. And tonight you took 2 actions that invested somewhere over $200,000 in community mental health. And that is the appropriation we made to the Edina Ed Fund of $140,000 and the extension of the agreement with Hennepin County to create a full-time social worker embedded in our police department. These are 2 very important things I think to our community and addressing a need that you think is important. And I just wanted to thank you for your action there and remind you that you did that tonight. So it was quite something. And the final action for me, or final item for me, is just to let you know that we are involved in the discussions around the national opioid settlement, right? So the Sackler family and I think another large pharma did create a national settlement with regards to the costs that they've imposed on society with regards to opioids. And each state is getting a piece of that money, and each state is able to decide how they're going to divide that up between local governments and the state government. The League of Minnesota Cities is one of the organizing groups that is working at dividing about how this money is going to be allocated among a number of different local governments. City Manager Jamie Verbrugge from Bloomington is representing city governments on this group as well. So we're part of that. We're talking about it, and I'll have something more to talk to you about in the very near future. And that's all I've got for you tonight.
Just made me think of when you mentioned Verbrugge, Jamie Verbrugge. You and I talked about this as a matter they're working on in Bloomington, and Member Staunton may have seen this as well in his work as a city attorney, but the mayor of Bloomington tells me that they're working on a ban on protesting on private property because they've had a lot of, just because of that report that came out from the National League of Cities about intimidation tactics and everything else. And so whether it's a business person or a government official or others that, when you and I talked about it, you said that you were staying in touch with Bloomington on it. And we're going to have us look at it as well. I
think there's some benefit to cities adopting common language in this regard. And so we are talking about that with them and wanting to make sure that our cities are treating this the same way. It would be better for our law enforcement to have a common understanding of how it works, and also for us to how we talk about it with residents as well.
All right, good. And then I noticed a piece of mail here. You and I talked about this before, but a letter from constituent of ours who is part of the Garden Council and has had, a number of surgeries now and can't maneuver over at Arneson Acres to get to the Tranquility Garden that she helped fund and work on because of the lack of ADA access from a pathway standpoint. And so I think that you had indicated that Perry Vetter was going to look at this issue, and maybe you're looking at it with them.
Yep.
Whether, ADA access in all of our parks and the ability to be more mobile. And of course, I mentioned that somebody else from the Garden Council that was totally mobile, and they didn't want any pathways, so there's a million opinions out there. All right, that's it, I think. Anything else from anybody that caused people to think of anything else?
Mr. Mayor, I do want to follow up on the Juneteenth suggestion from the city manager. I think it's an important holiday to recognize. I don't know what the protocol has been in the past for us adding holidays to our roster and what the implications are for wages and et cetera. And so I guess I'd like to hear some of that, but I think it's important to recognize it, whether that means there's another holiday we drop off or we add to it or what we do. But I think this is in our effort to be more welcoming and inclusive, it's recognizing an event that all of us should be thinking about every year. So
one response could be that we bring back a little bit more information about costs and protocol about how we've handled this in the past. We'd be happy to do that at your December 7th meeting.
That would be great.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Is there a second? Motion by Member Sutton, second by Member Anderson to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned. Bingo.